Just want to take a small moment to welcome you to the Developing a Digital Future conference. Really excited you could all make it. Looking forward to chatting with more of you later. We've got a really great lineup today. Speakers, we're really privileged to have John coming to us and speaking to us from Google, which is going to be really exciting. I know a lot of you have been really keen on that. Can I just mention a few notices? We will aim to keep to this time agenda as much as we can, but we'll take it as it comes. If you've got a mobile phone, can you try and put it onto silent so we don't get any interruptions while the speakers are speaking? That would be really good. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce Chris Weston. Now, unfortunately, our speaker, Wendy, came down with an illness right at the last minute and had to pull out. So we're sorry about that. We had to change the plan at the last minute. So I want to introduce Chris Weston, who's a good friend of ours, CTO, and he's come to fill in on Wendy's speech. So I'm going to introduce Chris, and he'll come and speak to us. Thank you.
Bună ziua! So, my name is Chris. Sunt in Marea Britanie. That is the end of my Romanian. You will notice that I am not Wendy, which I apologize for. But I know Wendy very well. Wendy's a friend of mine, and she's very sorry she can't make it today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through Wendy's presentation. I'm going to tell you about Wendy, about Jumar, and about the things that she is interested and passionate about. I'm glad to say that I am also passionate about many of the things that she cares about. So a lot of this resonates very much with me, and I hope it will with you too. I was in Moscow recently, so traveling around this part of the world, and in addition to my small Romanian, I learned to say da, niet, spasiba, privyet, and ja nie govoru po-ruski. That's all I needed. So, Amdaris and Jumar have been working together a lot recently. We've just put a project live, I think. A very big project for an insurance company, customer of Jumar. Been a very successful piece of work, hard work, but really fantastic result. So this is Wendy's presentation, so please bear with some of the rather incongruous words, but we'll cover an introduction to Wendy, what she does it, about Jumar. We'll talk about the new, what we call the digital age that Jumar is moving into, and the things that we're doing with Amdaris. But I'm also going to talk about technology and the pressures and the drivers that are pushing the way that recruitment is working in the UK, and why we need to work with partners in Eastern Europe, and how we are going to address some of the problems and the skills gap that we have in the UK. So this is Wendy's story. So Wendy's a really interesting character. She's not what you might call a typical IT person. She grew up in the 80s. And didn't come from a privileged background at all, working class family, and a bit of a rebel at the time. No qualifications, and women working alongside men was still very different in the UK then. Women expected to be housewives. But she went to work in an IT company in a very male-dominated environment. She did well there. And she formed Jumar Solutions. So, who knows what CA Gen is? Anybody heard of CA Gen? No, of course not, because you're all too young. CA Gen is what they call a case tool. Anybody heard of a case tool? Fantastic. So case tools, this is what we used to call, who's got a phone turn on? A case tool is what they used to call computer-aided software engineering. And CA-Gen was actually launched 30 years ago. So it's 30, happy birthday, Gen. And it was a tool that generated COBOL from a kind of a production environment. So there's still a lot of this COBOL out there, by the way. Everybody, a lot of government organizations, a lot of big organizations have used CA-Gen as a tool to generate mainframe applications and things like that. Jumar went into that business and still do a lot of work in CA-Gen today. It's still out there, and there's still some poor people trying to make it work and make the COBOL work. But when they, as they were doing that, they found they needed people, so they started a recruitment side to that business. And Jumar, the model still remains. Solutions feed recruitment and recruitment feed solutions. When you need to do a software project, you need to find people, you need to find skills. So what do? You need to go out to the world and use recruitment skills to do that. And when you're recruiting for people, and people are doing software projects, guess what? You find that they maybe need some skills they haven't got that you might be able to provide as a solutions company. So Jumar now, and I'll flick through this and look at that motley bunch there years ago. There's Wen there, see? Doesn't look a day older today, I promise you. Jumar today is a whole bunch of people, quite diverse. Birmingham, Manchester, and down in Sydney as well. Some customers out there. Good diversity in that business. And they're expanding into other areas. So these are the clients that Jumar work with. As you can see, some good names in there. A lot of them are CA-Gen customers with the old technology, but a lot of them are building new solutions too. And I want to get through that because really what I want to talk about is the future and the way that... So I do some work with Jumar to help them understand and move into sort of new technology areas. And Wen's got a vision to double the size of the business. She wants to make it into a really great business. It's a big business right now, say 80 people. She wants to double the size of that. She's building R&D, and she wants to embrace development and digital tech. So some of the things that we're talking about now are, as you can see, I mean, cloud isn't exactly new, but for some people it really is. Blockchain, Internet of Things, these are really important technologies to Jumar. And why are they important technologies to Jumar? Because customers are starting to look at these things and saying, how do we exploit them? How do we take our business and make better decisions with the information we have? How do we gather better information in order that the decisions are better? And how do we get that decisions to our decision makers faster so that they make better decisions in a more appropriate timescale? Internet of Things, for example, is a really important part of that. If you can gather more quality information from devices and from wearables, whatever, you can make better decisions with that. But IoT needs a lot of different skills to make it work properly. Blockchain is another tech that is, everybody wants to know what it is. People think they should be using it. A lot of people get overexcited about it, and there's quite a lot of hype around it. And what we need to do is to help steer our customers to make sure that they're choosing the appropriate technology, and they're not choosing technology because it's fashionable, or because it's sexy, or because it's got a lot of hype around it, that is absolutely right for them. So a technology company now has to work in those areas, and it needs a wide variety of skills to do so. Customers come to us about concepts. So why should they be worried about concepts, the different concepts in IT and technology today? They're even challenging the concept of documents, for example. So why is it that a document still really, even in a cloud form, is based on an A4 piece of paper? Because it really is. And an A4 piece of paper is an A4 piece of paper for lots of historical reasons, nothing to do with technology. The concept of the workplace. they ask us about the concept of the workplace. What do our people need to work? What information do they need and when do they need it? Where do they need to work? What do they need in their workplace to be able to work? Can they work at home? Can they work on their client site? Can they work in a shared office or in a multi-tenanted office? All of these things are challenges that our customers talk to us about because they want Jumar to have those answers. They say, you know, guys, you guys do a great job on A, B, and C. Tell us about how we should be exploiting tech. And of course, digital, everybody talks digital. How do we be a digital company? I don't know. You tell me what a digital company is. So one of the things that we see in IT and business right now is that we're no longer. So I talk to a lot of IT directors. You know, okay, I've been an IT director in various businesses. I talk at various events to IT directors. I run sessions with these guys. And for years and years and years, IT leaders have been told that they need to knock on the door, be in the boardroom, they need to be at the table making those decisions, and they never get invited because nobody wants to talk to the technical guy. And now suddenly it's changed. They're being dragged in. We need your help. Come on, come and help us. And the IT guys are, no, I don't, you know, don't make me make these decisions. We need to do this now because companies are more than ever in this adapt or fail world. Barriers to entry to business are coming down because of the technology that's available. You can spin up, you know, application software as a service in many different ways. So organizations need to embrace this tech. We need an agile workforce and we need to be aware of security, and all of these things add to the complexity of the IT landscape. And then we have this thing called millennial workforce. Again, for me, everybody's always the same as they have been. But now we have consumer tech. Everybody's got tech. Whether you're a millennial or whether you're 99, you've got tech in your hand that allows you to do things that you couldn't do before and drives expectations that we never had before. And we've got challenges in the UK as well around skills. So what's Brexit driving? Uncertainty. Because nobody really knows what's going on, certainly not the government. Gaps in expertise. So we have a drop in number of people coming to the UK now because of the political challenges that are going on. Potential skills shortage throughout the UK. You know, we draw a lot of people into the UK tech sector, and a drop in that. You know, here's a Financial Times headline. The UK needs a lot of people to fulfill its economic requirements. And it's going to get harder. So as a recruiter, Jumar see people starting to prioritise UK-based people. Now, okay, that pushes up price. But what it also means is that we need to, as an economy and as Jumar, to think about different ways that we deliver our solutions, to deliver the project outcome. And that means partnering with organisations like Amdaris, but organisations in Eastern Europe to say, we can find the skills that you need and we can build those skills and we can bring them to you, but it's in a more innovative way. It's not just about flying people over and filling seats in the UK. It's about the whole outcome. It's about making sure that customers get the outcome they're after, not just thinking about seats and people and why haven't I got 50 programmers in my office. So there are opportunities. There is a lot more outsourcing that will happen because of these skills gaps. And the relationships with quality partners is absolutely essential. So let me go back to an example that I just mentioned. So IoT, massive area. Now I work with various companies. I work with an IoT company as well. And you've got case studies in smart buildings, in wearables, and you need certain skills. You need to understand the hardware, you need to understand things like microservices, you need to understand how the communications work, you need some of the tech skills we look for, things like Node.js, we need server-side development capability, we need security knowledge, there's a lot of privacy issues around IoT. We need big data skills or unstructured data skills, sometimes NoSQL, things like that people are looking for. So just around what for a business seems like a simple question, we need some IoT. For a technology company, we know there's a whole stack of skills that we need to be able to provide. And guess what? You can't just have a room full of people ready to do this stuff. For an IT director, CIO, whatever it is, you've got a great panoply of tools now available to you. You can go to Azure, or you can go to Google. Sorry, John. You can go to Amazon, and you can spin up all sorts of tools. You can spin up NoSQL databases, you can spin up massive data processing power. But who's going to make that stuff work? You don't have those people sitting around necessarily on the bench waiting to do this new stuff that the CEO has asked you to do because you've won a new customer and the customer says, can we get this data from you? I need to know exactly when you did that and who you did it for and why you did it, and it needs to be integrated with this platform. Well, okay, the tools are there. We can go to Azure, we can go to Google, we can make the tool happen, but who's going to do it? So because consumer IT has driven this demand, yes, we need to integrate, yes, we want it on a tablet, yes, we want it tomorrow. Because people understand that they've got a tablet in their hand and if they want to do something different, they go to an app store and they can get free software in 2 minutes that does just about anything they want. So now we're expected that that's what we can do in business, is give people what they want tomorrow for free. Doesn't work like that, does it? So the workforce needs to be agile, and we need to be able to work with our partners to find those skills when we need them, at the time we need them, work for a short amount of time on a project with a specific outcome, do proof of concepts, MVP type work, and build those things fast and make sure that we know exactly what we're doing and make sure that the customer is doing exactly what they want. So partnerships with people like you guys, because every time I come to Moldova, and this is not the first time I've been here, I get blown away by the talent and the way that people work and the technical skills that are here. Makes me think, why would I ever go anywhere else? Really, it works so well. So we know that the talent is here. It's about making sure that we can access and we can drive that for specific outcomes for our customers. And I'm going to talk about something else briefly because it's something that Wendy is very focused on, and me too. Because I look in this room and it's quite encouraging because we've got a really good mix of people here. But that's not the case in the tech industry as a whole. We need to make more of the skills that we have in the workforce. We lose a generation of women and girls because we don't teach IT subjects in a very good way in the UK. And I'm going to stop that for a second. I just want you to watch this for a few minutes. This is a video that's inspiring the people in Jumar to think differently about how they look for skills and about how we approach software development and how we approach our projects and what kind of mindset you need. And it's a trailer for a film that you might think about watching at some point.
If you look at Twitter's user base, it reflects basically all of humanity.
There's no doubt in my mind that technology jobs are critical to every part of the economy, every part of the way we live, the way we work.
If we are somehow subtly or systemically excluding women, we are really cutting down on the size of the workforce.
Computer science is changing our whole world. Unfortunately, it's a very undiverse field. It's actually quite segregated.
This is both a gender as well as an ethnicity issue.
It's when the idea of the nerd genius came to the fore, and that's exactly when women started declining in their representation.
We imagine someone sort of sitting at a keyboard typing all day. We don't realize how much design and creativity goes into making software.
You don't have to be antisocial. You don't have to want to not sleep. You don't have to want to spend all of your time with a computer. You don't have to be male.
I think people are sometimes surprised when I tell them I work in computer science, just because it is a male-dominated industry.
As someone who studied rocket science, I can tell you that coding is not rocket science.
Writing software is just a tool to actually go build something cool that you want to build.
To be able to just build a product from the ground up, to make something exist where it didn't exist before, has been really exciting.
There's like so many like programs and websites now where you can just like teach yourself.
It was actually a really important thing for us as a company to establish having women on the team. The greater the empathy you have with the people that are trying to use the product, the better the product is.
I absolutely think that women can be just as great as men at programming. And the great thing is I can look the way I do, I can wear lipstick and write just as good code as you. And people need to be comfortable with that.
At conferences, there's been sexually explicit comments made towards speakers, towards attendants. It's gross. It's despicable.
We're not seen as part of the boys' club.
There's this assumption there like that I brought the coffee.
People would assume I was a recruiter or talk down to me. I can't think of a single software product that would only be used by men. So it's hard to imagine that it would be appropriate to have any team that was only men, or only women for that matter.
Important mantra is you are not your user.
Unfortunately, the first round of airbags killed a lot of women and children. And it turns out that the airbags were developed for the average specs of the engineer on the team. And those engineers happen to all be white men.
You have to be impatient. You have to say, this has to happen now. We have to do what we can now. Whatever it takes to move the number now, we have to do that now.
So that's the thing that's driving some of the thoughts and the way that we're working now with Jumar about how do we make sure that we've got proper representation amongst the teams that we build and about the candidates that we offer our customers. Because you know what, software development, technology development, it needs a lot of different skills, it needs a lot of different perspectives to make it work really well. And if you're focused in one way and you have a certain way of thinking, you will get it wrong. You will get it wrong, and it's important that we recognize that. And if we're going to make sure that we fill the skills gap, because there's a stat, and I've got it here, we need, in the UK, we need 100,000 new graduates in what we call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics every year. 100,000. Well, where are those going to come from if it's only the guys? And there's only 6% of females in the engineering workforce in the UK. It's just not good enough. So, this is another, I don't know whether you've seen Carrie Ann Philbin on TV or on YouTube. She's doing a great job of communicating science and coding to all sorts of people. You know, you don't have to be a girl to watch Carrie, but I'll just flick through some of this. You can see. No, maybe I'm not going to flick through it. Andy, you failed me.
As regular viewers to Geek Girl Diaries will know, I've got a bit of a thing for Space Invaders, as you can see from my wall behind me. Space Invaders was an arcade game from the 1980s. It was very addictive. Not only is my wall adorned with them, but also I have little accessories like necklaces with Space Invader symbols on them. It's not just Space Invaders, I like lots of 8-bit pixel art. And that's got me thinking about, well, what is pixel art? What are computer graphics? What are pixels? And how can I make my own? In this tutorial, we are going to program some pictures using Pygame and Python. And I'm going to do that on my Raspberry Pi. Computer graphics are made out of little dots, and we call these dots pixels. And they're a bit like little tiny squares. They're arranged in rows and columns, and the more squares you have in an image, the more pixels, the clearer the image will be. You're probably wondering why, if they're made up of little squares, how is it that we get triangles or circles on the computer screen? Well, let's have a look at the triangle. Here you can see I've made a triangle out of 4 squares. But it doesn't really look that great as a triangle. Let's add some more squares. So now we're starting to see a better triangle shape, so let's add some more squares. Using lots of smaller squares gives better definition. The shape begins to look more like a triangle. If we only have a few squares in our image, then this is low resolution graphics. If we have lots of squares in our image, we have high resolution graphics. The more pixels, the better. And just to show you that dots can make beautiful artwork, let's use Google's art project to take a look at Surat's paintings. Surat used lots of tiny dots to make his pictures and paintings. This is one of his most famous paintings. It's a very, very large canvas. And if I zoom all the way in, thanks to Google's art project, you will be able to see the dots that the artist has used to make the grass and the lady's dress here. And you can see almost that there are lots of little tiny different coloured dots. And if I zoom all the way in, it becomes much, much clearer, the paint effect that he has used to make this beautiful painting. And just as a side note, if you've never used Google's art project before, you can actually see this painting where it would be on the wall in the gallery using the street view. So I've never actually seen this painting in real life because it's in Chicago and I've never been to Chicago to see it. But thanks to Google, I get a beautiful view of the gallery in the room that it's actually situated in. You can see it's a very, very large picture. Imagine making that with lots of little tiny dots. Okay, let's get busy making.
If you watch that to the end, she'll go through a Python tutorial and teach kids how to code a game in Python, the Space Invaders game. And as you can see there, she's explained the pixels really well. And that's, to me, that's the future of what we have to do. We have to make sure that technology is accessible and bring lots of the kids through, understanding how to code, how to make things work, but of girls and boys as well. Your battery is running low. You might want to plug in your PC. So, and I just want to finish up and say, why did Jumar work with Amdaris? And again, this is Wen's presentation, and these are her words really. But she saw the opportunity of working with talent in Moldova. She saw that you guys had a good diversity, which is very important to her, and she really thought the culture doesn't matter, because you know what? The presentation is not important. I am important. She recognised there was a real a join between the culture in Jumar and the culture in what she was trying to create around delivering technology for her customers, and people in Moldova, the way that you were doing the software delivery, as I mentioned earlier. So it worked really well for Wen, and the results have been good in terms of the work we've done so far. So what I would say to you guys here today, and I think this is a fantastic event, and I'm really proud to be, even by proxy, by accident, starting it for you, is to see you guys here, to see some great speakers, to see somebody like John, who clearly knows all there is to know about so many things, brain the size of a planet, etc. It just gives me such optimism and excitement about what's going to happen next, where we're going to go, the projects we're going to deliver, the customers that we're going to satisfy, the money we're going to make. It's all very, very positive. So I hope that you have a great day. I hope that It is exactly what you wanted it to be. If you've got any questions about anything I've said, and I work in a lot of different technology areas. I do a podcast called WB40. We were in the BBC the other day recording the latest version. That was very exciting in the BBC. Now my papers are on the floor. So if you've got any questions at all about what I've said now or even during the day, please come and say hello. If you've got questions now, please shout them out. But otherwise, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. If you stay there just a second, we will go out and see if there's any questions that anyone has. I guess I'll start the ball rolling in terms of the whole skill gap thing. So given that there is a big issue with resourcing in the UK, what do you think, just some practical things that you think can be that a country like Moldova can do and promote to make itself more known?
So that's a really good question, because when you go to, I talk to CIOs about their resourcing requirements all the time. Some of the talks that I do, often they're not to technology people, they're to business people generally, about how they're going to find the skills to do their projects, because it's a real issue for them. And they really don't know where to go. They know that they can go to India, they know that they can go to, they can go online and they can find an outsourcer. But there's also people have done that and they've got bitten because they don't understand that, guess what, you can't just pay, half as much and get quality. It doesn't work like that. And a lot of the outsourcing companies, they don't, it's just people on seats, and you're really, you're running a risk when you do that. So I think for the companies in Moldova, the key is to be focused on delivery, and for the people working in those companies in Moldova is to be working with, for me, the key that I've seen is about working with partners in the UK, so that you have a level of surety, and people feel more comfortable with the fact that there's a link, and that there's a communication. The communication overhead has been managed, because we've got tools now. We can do continuous integration. We can have augmented teams. We can use Google Hangouts rather than Skype, of course. We can build teams across geographies. We really can. But it's about showing how that can really work in practice, and that you're not just throwing the problem over the wall, crossing your fingers and hoping it gets solved, because that's the big risk, and so those are the challenges that I see. But I think that's where the opportunity is too.
Great. Any questions? Anyone want to raise their hand and we'll come and...
Be brave.
Any questions to Chris? Go on, someone be brave. John.
So you talked about diversity in terms of getting more women into computing. As you'll see, that's something I'm passionate about as well. How do we unlock other continents that are... how many software engineers are there in Africa? How can we unlock that pool of potential talent?
Really good question again, and so I can't talk for Jumar in that sense really, but I do know I know people working in recruitment in Africa, working with companies across the African continent, and they again have a challenge in how do they find local talent, because a lot of that tends to be, okay, we're going to bring in somebody from overseas, and what they're trying to do is make sure that they have all of the skills available, and they talk to the universities, they talk to the schools, and they try to find where people are actually having the I guess the opportunity to learn, because that's the key, isn't it? In many areas, it's not about talent, or it's not about willingness. It's just about opportunity. So you've got to seed that opportunity, I guess, and you've got to try and work with as many teams as you can. I mean, I also work with a company in the UK that delivers apprenticeships for young people in technology, and again, they're doing a really good job of communicating that opportunity to the kids. The question is in those other continents, in Africa and India, in the Indian subcontinent, and those areas, how do we help encourage that? And I think what really, sorry, John, but it's got to be companies like Google and Microsoft and Amazon and all those guys that have got the wherewithal, the resources, and let's face it, the need. You guys are going to need people. You're going to need skills. So we're going to. I think we need to look to those guys as well to help seed that talent, because it's definitely there.
Anyone else? A question? No?
Hello. Thank you for a great presentation. My question is, should motivation be financial, or it's better to be like public appreciated?
Well, that's a really good question, isn't it? I guess I can only speak for myself. As I've continued through my career, I think you start off, money's not so important. You just want to enjoy yourself. You want to do the things you enjoy, and then you start to get a little bit more commercial, maybe a bit more cynical, and then maybe you're going to go the other way again, and realize, actually, do you know what? The things you gather around you aren't as important as the things you do. So for me, I guess I've been through that. Now I'm very old and decrepit. I've been through that cycle. If there's a lesson, though, and maybe the reason I've reached that stage is that if you're chasing the finance side, you're chasing the money, it doesn't sustain it. If you're just trying to sell something tomorrow to say, I've sold something and I've got the money, and you're not focused on the quality and you're not focused on the outcome, it doesn't sustain. You will not succeed in the long term. So I guess what the answer to that is, if you focus on solving people's problems, solving understanding their outcomes, and that's a real challenge for challenge for technologists, because we want things to be right, we want things to be elegant, we want to be able to say that we've done something that everybody else will think is cool. But it's not always what the customer really needs, what people's outcome really need. It might be different. So it's about focusing on doing the things that are going to change people's lives for the better, focusing on their needs sometimes rather than what they say they want. And if you focus on that outcome and constantly do that, then the rewards, whether it be money or whether it be the ability and the opportunity to do, what I'm doing today and meet, different people and, get different experiences and look at new technology, those experiences and those rewards come, in my view, if you concentrate on the quality and the outcome, if that helps.
Anyone else? Great, super. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, everybody.
Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, just going to show you something quickly before we move on to John. This is just a little video about our Amdaris internship. Again, talking about the diversity thing. We're very keen to train people, to input into people, to raise their skill levels, whether they're male, female, doesn't matter to us. But we want to encourage more of the universities to bring through more of the girls as well. But have a look at this. I hope you like it.
În cadrul programului de internship, tinerile talente au posibilitatea să însușească și să pună în practică cunoștințe vaste din domeniul dezvoltării unei aplicații software, avându-i ca și trainer și mentor pe unii din cei mai buni specialiști din domeniu.
Mă numesc Vladimir. Am avut ocazia să particip la internship organizat de compania Amdaris, în cadrul căruia, timp de 3 luni, am învățat bazele pentru crearea aplicațiilor web. Și recomand tuturor persoanelor pasionate de web development să profite de posibilitatea oferită de către compania Amdaris.
Меня зовут Олег, я несколько лет работаю программистом в Амдарисе и преподаю в интернатуре. Амдарис 2 раза в год делает набор на интернатуру. Сам курс состоит из 3 частей. Первая часть – это язык программирования C# и методики гибкой разработки. Вторая часть – это работа с данными. Мы там преподаем ORM и SQL. Третья часть – это веб-часть. Мы там преподаем ASP.NET MVC, HTML, CSS и немного JavaScript.
Меня зовут Вадим, я являюсь сотрудником компании Amdaris. Я прошел школу-интернатуру. С самого начала преподаватели наши являются те же коллеги, ведущие программисты, с которыми нет ощущения, что ты студент и ты пришел к профессору. Мне безумно понравилось, я не пожалел ни на секунду.
Programul de internship, vreau să vă spun că este un program foarte interesant, cu o experiență interesantă pentru cei care studiază aici și pentru cei care predau. Scopul este de a crește echipa Amdaris cu noi membri profesioniști, care știu ce trebuie să facă și cum să o facă în cel mai bun mod.
Mă numesc Daniela. Programul de internship în compania noastră este unul foarte puternic. După finalizarea cursurilor, stagiarii sunt deja pregătiți de a fi inclus în proiecte ongoing. Un exemplu poate fi și proiectul pe care îl coordonez, din care fac parte foarte intern și descurcă foarte bine.
Mă numesc Ion, sunt membru a echipei Amdaris și promovăm în cadrul companiei proiectul de certificare internațională Microsoft, în cadrul căruia fiecare angajat îi oferim oportunitatea de a obține acest certificat de calitate Microsoft în domeniul web aplicațiilor.
Candidații pentru acest program sunt acei studenți și acele persoane care au o bază sau cunoștințe de bază în programare și au o enormă dorință de a crește aceste cunoștințe.
Mă numesc Marian, sunt angajat în cadrul companiei Amdaris și consider că programul de internship este unul foarte reușit, deoarece spre deosebire de universitate, aici se pune accent pe cunoștințe real necesare pentru a debuta o carieră în IT.
It's a great pleasure now to invite John to come up and to speak to us. It goes without saying, I think he's been referred to by many names, but I'm not gonna start getting into jokes, the John Skeet jokes or anything like that. We'll leave that till later. But I know you're really excited to hear from him and what he's got to say on the future of software development. So John, would you like to come up? Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. So, as Andy said, my name's John Skeet. I'm a senior software engineer at Google, and you've probably seen me on Stack Overflow. I would say that the video we've just seen of Amdaris did seem a little unrealistic to me, because I saw a lot of screens with a lot of code on, and there wasn't one web browser open to Stack Overflow. And we all know that the reality is that all programmers will be using Stack Overflow several times a day. I hadn't seen Chris's presentation before he gave it, and some of what I say will be effectively repeating some of what he said. I hope that some of the later presentations repeat the same things again, because I would like, if you take nothing else from this conference away with you, I would like you to take away the idea that diversity is incredibly, incredibly important. It's lovely to see that this audience is a more diverse audience than I've seen at many other conferences, but it's not good enough yet. Okay, I'll come back to that later on. I want to pick up something else that Chris was talking about, which was one of the videos he showed, showing the Surah picture, the Sunday afternoon in the Grand Chat. So this is a topic which is somewhat near and dear to my heart. And the fact that I'm completely off notes before I've even started suggests that timing could be interesting, but it'll be fine. I'm a big fan of a musical composer called Stephen Sondheim. Have any of you heard of Stephen Sondheim? No? Well, go and find some Stephen Sondheim musicals. They are fantastic. And one of them is called Sunday in the Park with George. And I've always thought that it has quite a lot to do with software engineering. It's about George Seurat painting that Sunday afternoon on Grand Jatte out of all those dots. And here's the start of it. It says, white, a blank page or canvas. The challenge, bring order to the whole. Through design, composition, tension, balance, light, and harmony. Now, just saying that, I've got sort of goose pimples on the back of my neck because I can then imagine the musical coming through. But what better description of software engineering than starting with a blank page? We heard Geek Girl saying, I love bringing something where there was nothing before. And one of the lines in Sunday in the Park with George is, and look, I made a hat where there never was a hat. Coming to it through design, composition, tension, light, balance. I don't know what Sondheim knows about software engineering, but there's something there. I'm genuinely going on to my slides in a minute, but the background behind probably everything I say is people. Tech is not important, people are. And if you put the people first, in all kinds of ways, in every way you can imagine, then the tech will fall into place. It won't be easy. I'm not saying that software engineering suddenly becomes simple, but it becomes more important. Finally, I'm going to talk about the future of software development. So I think it's important that I lay out my credentials, my qualifications for speaking about the future. And this is where it'd be really handy if I could just have a tumbleweed coming across the front here. I have no credentials whatsoever for telling you what the future is going to be. Your guess is as good as mine. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. If it makes you think about what you think will happen in the future, that's a far, far better outcome than if you just listen and say, yeah, John said that's going to happen. It's bound to happen. It's really not. Okay, I'm going to need my water quite a lot. So, I'd like to start with a quote from William Gibson, saying, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. I think that's true and has been true for a very long time. There are places in the world now that are doing all kinds of things that we may not see in our daily lives for 20 years. There are things that we do in our daily lives that some other parts of the world won't see for 20 years. The future and the current isn't one thing everywhere you go. So maybe some of you have been doing cloud software development for 5 years. Some of you may not touch anything to do with the cloud for another 5 years. And all of that is fine. But let's talk about invention, in particular in terms of a couple of past inventions. First, I want to talk a little bit about the history of printing. Sorry, apologies if you can't read this at the back. I'll just read them out. So we start with, in about 200 AD or CE, woodblock printing. Then in 1040, movable type, so 840 years later. Then in 1440, Gutenberg's printing press. 1515, so only less than 100 years later, 75 years later, there's etching, then mezzotint, then aquatint, lithography. In the 1800s, there were another 6 inventions. This is according to Wikipedia, so this is sort of taking a potted history. And then in the 20th century, so the 1900s and onwards, there were another 13 sets of developments. You might have thought that printing was done, and yet it seems to be accelerating. And if you wonder what that's got to do with tech, Imagine talking about information wants to be free in a world where there was never any mass printing. How are people going to read to start with? You don't go from not having common ideas about text to having universal computing. Likewise, lithography is one of the bases of modern printed circuit board manufacture and even the chips themselves. But beyond just text, there is something interesting about printing that I hadn't particularly appreciated before this year, really. So a few years ago, my wife and I went to Florence, and we saw the highlight of the trip for me, as well as being away with just my wife and my kids were with my parents. So romantic time away with my wife is a fantastic, fantastic thing. But one of the highlights in terms of what we visited was an exhibition of Salvador Dali, Picasso, and Juan Miro, who's an artist I hadn't looked at all before. And it was a brilliantly done exhibition that showed how the three of them sort of met and interacted and how they learnt from each other. Great stuff. And I think it was mostly Miro's early work. This year we went to Bruges for the same kind of trip away. And I don't know how coincidental it is, but we saw an exhibition of Picasso, Dali, and Miro. You'll hear me say Miro in several different ways because I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce his surname properly. And one of the points made in the Picasso part was, people know Picasso's paintings, but he did, I think it was about 70 or 80,000 lithographs and other printed aspects. And it wasn't Picasso that actually drew my eye particularly, it was the Miro. And we went back from Bruges, and I started thinking, I wonder if you can buy these. This was a very dangerous thought. This was a very expensive holiday, not for while I was there, but when we come back. So I now have 2 Miro prints. And what I find really interesting is, if you've got an oil painting, and it's the original, you know it's the original, okay? The artist put the blobs, the picture of Sunday afternoon on the Grand Jatte that we saw, the Cultural Institute Art Project, Chicago, that's where the original is, and there's one of them. And then you can think, well, you could get a reproduction of that picture, and it won't be in oil on canvas, but you can get a perfectly good picture of it and hang it on your wall. And you can see the same thing, but it's not the same thing. You know what I mean? And then come prints. One of my Miros is out of, I think, 100. It's number 41 out of 100. And the other is number 243 out of 300. 300 not quite identical copies, because each of those was physically printed and then hand numbered, and in the other case, hand signed as well. Is that a reproduction or is it an original? It's somewhere in between. And you may be wondering what on earth this has got to do with tech. But it speaks to the past value of rarity. And in the tech world, rarity sort of doesn't happen. Or it's very strange. If I have a copy of a Taylor Swift album, that doesn't stop anyone else from having the same copy of a Taylor Swift album. Could I sign a copy? So, Nodatime is the open source library I write for date time things. If you're doing .NET and date and time related things, use Nodatime, advert over. So, could I sell a copy of Nodatime signed with a private key that is then thrown away and no one else would have that one signed in the same way? Unless you sort of took a copy on a USB drive. But what if I signed it and signed it saying that it was for your email address? Oh, well, that's great, but then how do you sell it on to somebody else and maintain that level of originality. Well, you could then sign it and say, I transfer it over to this person, and my understanding is you end up with something a little like blockchain. So these ideas of, to some extent, inflated art prices and artificial rarity sort of do come into computing as well. So this was why I particularly picked the history of printing. It has much more to do with tech than you might originally think. Let's look at something a little bit more familiar. Mobile computing. I originally put mobile phones, and it's not quite right, and mobile computing may not be right either. So again, for those of you further back, in 1917, 100 years ago, a patent was filed for a pocket-sized folding telephone with a very thin carbon microphone. That's some seriously ahead of time thinking. The fact that it says pocket size and folding. There have been folding phones. I don't know how many phones these days are folding, but it's been a trend. I suspect it'll come back. And the idea of pocket size, that didn't actually materialize for a very, very long time. In 1946, there was the mobile telephone service, which wasn't cellular. I read up some of the tech behind it. And it was very expensive because it could only have a few calls going on at a time because it wasn't cellular. So that's 1946, just after the Second World War. And then in 1973, Motorola demonstrated, and I think it was only shown, only made available a few years later, a portable telephone that was 2 kilograms, okay? No one is going to carry that round with them everywhere they go. And I remember when laptops were 2 kilograms, and that felt heavy, but just for a phone, and this would be just a phone that you could use to make phone calls. You know, you weren't going to do anything else with it. So that was 1973. Then come a bunch of phones, and then the Apple Newton in 1993. Now, looking out, my guess is that 1993 feels like a very long time ago to many of you. It doesn't feel very long ago to me. So I'm 41, I was born in 1976, and I was astonished when I thought, in the 90s, the Apple Newton was only in the 90s. You know, the idea of a PDA pretty much didn't exist before then. And then other things came out, so the Palm Pilot in 1996, and RIM came out not first with BlackBerry, but with an interactive pager, and even then they were using, you know, an @ sign to be cool. And the first actual BlackBerry wasn't until 1999. I sort of think of BlackBerries as old tech and, you know, the dying generation of mobile phones, but the first one wasn't until 1999. I graduated from university then. And dear to my heart, the Nokia 7110, one of the first phones with WAP. Did any of you ever use WAP? Yeah, I've got a few. Wasn't it terrible? Back then, yeah, probably by 99, I worked at a very small company called Paramon. And we were the first company in the world to do email, to do hosted email over WAP. We were the very first company, along with about 20 other companies that were claiming to be the first company that did hosted email over WAP. But as it happened, it wasn't that was the most popular bit of our website for WAP users. It was the fact that I ported the Colossal Cave Adventure so you could play that very painfully on a WAP phone. And apparently that ended up being really popular, just as a little side project. So in 2000, the iPad came out. Again, I thought that was about 10 years earlier. And then in 2007, the first iPhone. 2008, we have Android. And after that, I haven't listed anything, because what would you list? What's been important as a milestone since then? A milestone is something you get once per mile. They're revolutionary things. Since then, we've had so many evolutions, even relatively big things sort of get swept away just by the number of different developments that we get. So I want to emphasize that there are lots of different inflection points in mobile computing, and other people might choose different ones, and everyone's got their own story to tell. You remember when I said that the future is here but unevenly distributed? I carried a mobile phone before 2008, probably since about 99. Yeah, definitely I had a 7110 and I had some other Nokias. Back then I used to occasionally forget to charge it over the weekend because I only had to charge my phone once a week. Wow, those were the days. It seems battery life is the one thing that's gone backwards over time. But I didn't have a smartphone until 2008, and I only had a smartphone because I was working for Google, and when the G1 was released, we got given one for Christmas as a present. It was lovely. And I thought, well, it's nice to have a phone for free, that's great. I can't see myself using it for actually accessing the internet. I know people talk about that, but I don't think it's actually going to happen. This is why you shouldn't believe any of my predictions about the future. If I can't see the future when it's right in front of me. And of course, by about 3 months later, the phone was the first thing I would check. But different people would have come to things at different times. My parents used to go on narrowboats, on canals, a lot of the time. And I apologize, by the way, if I'm using... I use the same kind of colloquial English that I would use to any other audience, because I don't know anything apart from English. I would love to be able to be speaking to you in Romanian fluently, but it would be awful. So if there are English words I'm using that you don't understand, that's my fault, not yours, okay? You're 10 times smarter than me already by understanding me at all. Anyway, so my parents used to sail a boat a lot, and they used to want to be able to keep in touch. And they would say, we'll turn our phone on between 8 and 9. Their experience of a mobile phone was nothing like mine. It was something that you would schedule a phone call. Like, no, the point is to have it on you pretty much all the time. Well, I say pretty much all the time. Before I had a smartphone that I put in my pocket, I used to have it in my bag, if I could be bothered. If I had my bag with me, my bag would probably be in the different part of the house for a lot of the time. Now my phone really is almost always with me. Mine's under my chair at the moment and on silent anyway, but it's pretty much something that goes with me. And it's been that way since about 2009. For some of you, it may have been earlier than that, and I doubt that there are many of you who wouldn't go around with a phone now. Maybe your parents do. My parents certainly are still less interested in phones, or less reliant on them. So, we've ended up with iOS and Android. What's the future of mobile computing going to be? Chris was saying, Wendy's vision for 2020 is to double the revenue. I'm not interested in predictions about 2020. That's far too close to be interesting to me. It's also slightly feasible that you could make a reasonably accurate prediction about 2.5 years' time. I far prefer to think about 10, 15, 20 years' time, where you can say anything, and I'm sure in 2030, no one's going to be looking back at a recording of this talk to see how wrong I was. So it's all good. So what's mobile computing going to be like in 2030? Will there still be Android? Will there still be iOS? I have no idea. The fact that we seem to be in a stable equilibrium at the moment, I wouldn't treat that as any prediction of the future. Upsets can always happen. I remember before Google, when we had Alta Vista as the search engine, and I used to work for Alta Vista. Not in the search bit, but it's quite cool to have worked in both Alta Vista and Google, not on search for either of them. But people would have thought, oh, well, Alta Vista is the search engine forever, and then Google comes along. Obviously, for my personal reasons, I kind of hope that Google does stay around for a very long time indeed, at least until I retire. So that's looking at some of the past, the history of mobile development. So what is coming in the future? And I want to talk in 3 terms. Not that. Sorry, yeah, I've got a whole other slides I've forgotten about. So, more history, sorry. History of software development. And this time, instead of looking to Wikipedia, I'm going even lazier. I'm going to something that I can consult and write on a plane without any internet connection, which is my personal history, because that's the only one that matters to me. So, I originally started writing code on a ZX Spectrum 48K. Other UK folks, because it was pretty much only UK. Any of you have a Spectrum? Yeah, oh, we've got, wow, more than I expected, yay. With a little rubber keyboard that you used to get some keys that you'd have to really, really press very hard to get to work. So I programmed in BASIC, and then in BASIC on BBC Micros, and then in Turbo Basic on PCs. And then I moved over to C. I learnt C from a ring binder with, I don't know what kind of tutorial it was, but I was very self-taught and very, very bad at it. I basically only knew about code reuse via including another .h file. I didn't know about the idea of coming up with a library that I could reference at all. So my C code is terrible, absolutely terrible. It got a little bit better, but it was pretty awful. I then started doing Java while I was in university, but before university actually asked me to, as it were. Started in Visual C++ in about 95 as well, and then C# from pretty much the start. And C# is now by far my favorite language, with Java as the second. So you've each got your own history, and I would encourage you to think about it and write it down. You may find there are things that you've kind of forgotten that you ever learnt. I'd kind of forgotten about Turbo Basic, but I had a lot of fun with it. How much has changed since there from doing Spectrum Basic to C#? Well, we've gone from one monolithic file back when the proudest thing I ever wrote on the Spectrum was a logo interpreter. Logo is another programming language where the idea is there's a little robot that you're representing, which has pens, so it's like a giant printer, and you can say, go forward 100, turn 90 degrees right, go forward 100, turn 90 degrees right, go forward 100, turn 90 degrees right, go forward 100. You've drawn a square, wahey! We had that on the BBC Micros at school. I didn't have it on my Spectrum. And stupidly, I didn't realize that writing a logo interpreter was kind of a big project and not something that a 10-year-old or however old I was, it was about 10 or 11, it's not something that I should have taken on. So stupidly, I just did it instead. And I learned trigonometry from the Spectrum manual. So the manual that came with the computer taught me trigonometry. Are there any computers sold today that will teach a 10-year-old trigonometry? It doesn't happen. Those were the days. But that was one monolithic file. There was no idea of breaking up code into several different files in Spectrum Basic. And we had line numbers, so go sub 7000 would draw or undraw the turtle on the screen. Then we had, I wrote some C with lots of different files, but still building one big file, big executable at the end. And now, of course, it's much more component-oriented, and things are broken down into multiple packages. The composition part of Sunday in the Park with George. In terms of how we used to run things and debug them, well, when you're running Spectrum Basic, it's like you're always running in a debugger, in that you can just hit break at any time and the program will stop executing. You can look at all the variables, because there's no scoping, they're just variables, they're everywhere. Make some changes and then hit continue and it will keep running. So it's almost like there's always a debugger, but without any of the features that we expect from debuggers these days. It did mean that if you were playing a game written in Spectrum Basic, oh no, I've died, hit break, add 10 to the number of lives. Continue. Yay, I can keep going. I had a great game called Dungeon Master or something that I had loads of fun with, like that. So now we have much better debuggers. It used to be a case of writing some code, hoping it would work, trying it, and then fixing it. Now we write tests. We still have to fix the code when the tests fail, and then we test again. It used to be that I would write for a single platform, and a single user at a time, and a single computer. And these days, we write code which is largely portable. So I could write C# code that can run on an iPhone, or an Android phone, or a Windows phone, if anyone's got any of those, or an Xbox. Or I could write some server-side code, and you could run it on your local server, you could run it on your Raspberry Pi, you could run it on Microsoft Azure, you could run it on Google Cloud Platform, you could run it on Google Cloud Platform. I should have said my day job is making Google Cloud Platform rock for C# developers. Or you could run it on AWS. So it's much more portable, and you're aiming at a much wider audience. Back then, and this is, again, before a lot of you were born, I suspect, we used to be able to go into a newsagent and buy a magazine that was stuffed full of source code. And you would take the magazine home and you would type in the source code. And you would make lots of mistakes, and maybe there were mistakes in the source code that was printed as well. And do you know, it wasn't a bad way to learn. There's a lot to be said for having to type in the code rather than just reading a tutorial of what someone else has done, or saying, okay, well, I want to run through the tutorial, so I'll copy-paste all the code. Well, you learn a lot more if you're actually physically typing. Something about slowing you down. Whereas nowadays we have documentation, we have Stack Overflow. It's a very significant shift. Along with the single platform and single computer, we have audience for your code. Back then, I had Logo that I was really proud of. It never ran on any computer other than the one I had. I don't think I even gave it to any friends with Spectrum so that they could run it. And that makes me sad. These days, I hardly write any code that isn't available to everyone. The code I write for Google is open source. Demo code for presentations is usually open source. Node@time is open source. I write it, I test it, I push it up to GitHub. Everyone can read it. Likewise, I write on Stack Overflow, so there's an audience there of far more people than just me. And in terms of input, well, I used to type on a rubber keyboard, and now I type on a better keyboard. Hardly any change. I used to use a big TV. I now have a nice monitor. Hardly any change. Okay, the resolution has changed enormously, but this isn't a paradigm shift. So part of the point here is things haven't actually changed that much. Probably less than you might expect. And so that's why I'm actually predicting that things won't change very much in terms of how we do software. But let's think actually about the future now. And I've broken it up into 3 bits. So who is doing software? What is this software we're building? And how are we building it? And this is where we get into the repetitive bit. So, I'm a big fan of diversity. And I want my set of colleagues, so the team that I work on at the moment is all men. That makes me sad. It's not all white men, so, slight tick. It's slightly more diverse than it might be, but not a huge amount. I want you to just look around the room. Is this room representative of the users of your product? Maybe you don't have a product yet. But when you come to build a product, do you think that the user base will look like this? I would suggest probably not. It will be a better gender balance, and gender is the thing that we tend to talk about most in terms of diversity, partly because it doesn't matter so much in terms of, or rather, it varies less with geography. So pretty much wherever you go, there are roughly 50-50 men and women. And pretty much wherever you go, that's not reflected in tech. So I don't know what the racial numbers are like in Moldova. Certainly in the UK, it's rather more, and it varies a lot depending on the bit of the UK, but it's predominantly white, compared with certainly several places in the US where there's a much better racial mix, ethnicity. So it's sort of fairly natural that if you're in a town that is almost entirely white, then your teams are likely to be almost entirely white. But what we want to make sure is that that isn't built into the system. So there are 4 reasons that I want to sort of campaign for more diverse teams. We want better products, better ideas, better quality, and a better world. So the tech industry has a big role in shaping how people live their lives. Even if we think that we're responding to people's needs, how we respond to them changes how they will live their life. So if Facebook had come along in a slightly different form, that would have changed how people use it. I don't know how, I'm not suggesting any particular way, but I'm saying it has an impact. So the more we can represent everyone across gender, sexual orientation, race, age, physical impairment, whatever aspect you want, the better we will understand our users and address their problems. Secondly, we get better ideas from a different, more diverse group. Okay, it may be nothing to do with the product itself, but if you've had different life experiences to me, you will think about all kinds of things differently. Will it change whether you think we should use tabs or spaces? Maybe not. Obviously we should use spaces. But it may well change how you think about structuring your code, how you think about breaking a problem down into smaller problems. And let's face it, all of software is taking one big problem and breaking it into smaller problems. That's just what we do a lot. So how you think about doing that definitely affects the code that you will write. So if you have more diversity of ideas, the better ideas can bubble to the surface. You can persuade me that your way of looking at code makes the code more robust. I can persuade you in a different argument that my way of the code makes it run faster, or whatever it is. And we can get those better ideas. There's a certain irony that some people who are opposed to, well, they wouldn't say they're opposed to diversity, but they talk about political correctness gone mad, saying that people can't freely express their ideas anymore. And one of the points of diversity is to get more ideas being spoken, being expressed, but being expressed respectfully and in an atmosphere of what we call psychological safety. So in a psychologically safe team, there can be lots of room for arguments. But those arguments feel like you're discussing the problem, not each other. There's plenty of room for disagreement, and that's really, really healthy. The last thing you want is a team that always does what one person in the team says, or that all has the same idea. So you never need to have a meeting because you're all going to think the same thing anyway. Terrible for a team. Diversity within a psychologically safe team leads to passionate discussion, and no one gets hurt by it. May sound idealistic, I know, but that's what we're aiming for. So we get better ideas. Third, and this sounds like I'm repeating the same point again, but it is different, we get better quality. And the easiest way I can express this is, suppose I went to a recruiter and said, Okay, give me your best people, so long as their surnames start with letters A to M. I don't want anyone with letters N to Z as the start of their surname. The recruiter is going to look at you and say, why are you wanting to throw away half of the people? I've got this really great candidate, but they happen to start with, T. If you do that, you will end up with a company of a lower overall quality because you're not casting your net as widely as you can. Now, no one says that they do that. No one goes to a recruiter, I would hope, and says, give me men, I don't want to hire women. I say that, but equally, I'm pretty much aware of people who say, oh no, if I hire a young woman, then she might get pregnant and then go off and have kids and then not come back. And I think certainly until recently, that would have been a reasonably common concern for a manager to express. I don't know whether it still is. I really hope not. Because, hey, you can look after that employee still, and if you've provided a great work environment, guess what? They're going to want to come back, and they'll have more life experiences and provide even better quality. So, you get better teams of higher caliber individuals the more diversity you have. And fourthly, it's just morally better. Okay? I don't know whether I need to persuade any of you that discrimination is a bad idea. It's just not right. You're as human as I am. I have a t-shirt that says feminism is the radical notion that women are people. Obviously, there's rather more to feminism than that, but that is sort of the basic tenet. And if we treat each person as being of equal value, not treat them as if they're all the same, but of equal value, that they are real people who have real emotions, then the world is simply a better place, and your team can be part of that. Thank you. Yay. As I say, Chris said a lot of this before. Possibly other presenters will say something similar. It is a big thing for me. How does this work with the future? I believe, I really hope and pray that in the future companies will be more diverse. You sort of don't expect businesses to do it for the sake of morality. If you've got a big enough company that it can afford to say, well, I'll take a bit of a performance hit or whatever to do the right thing, that's great. But I think it's much easier to persuade companies by saying, you'll do better if you do the right thing as well. And that's what makes it so mind-boggling that we're still in the position we're in today. When companies with more diverse boards, leave alone tech, companies with more women in the boardroom do better, and yet somehow they're still kind of artificially kept out. So I believe that in the future, if you don't hire in a diverse way, if you don't look after your employees, bearing in mind individual needs, you'll just suffer and die as a company. So the future I envisage is one where equality plays a big part naturally and commercially. So that was the who. What about the what? I thought about how to express this, and I want the digital world to be in the background. Think about all the films you've seen and books you may have read that are set in the future. A fair amount of the time tends to be spent focusing, the camera focuses on the robots or the screens or the implants or the tech. I really hope that's wrong. How many films focus on a light switch? Why would you? You turn on the light and the light comes on and it's just there. You assume it will work, it works. Admittedly, I wish that hotels tended to have light switches in more predictable positions, but that's a different matter. It's in the background. Getting power to a light, and even the switch itself and dimmers and all kinds of things, there's tech there, but we don't think of it as tech. And I want that to happen as well. Chris talked about blockchain and Internet of Things and cloud. I would like them to sort of not be important. Certainly, your average consumer may have heard something about the cloud, but there's no real reason why they should know about it. We should only know about it in terms of what we need to do to solve people's problems. It's about people, not the technology. Anytime that you start chasing the technology for the technology's sake, if that's for fun, then that's fine. Just don't pretend to yourself that you're doing it to solve people's problems. If you're solving people's problems and it happens to involve a particular tech, absolutely fine. So I think something like the cloud, and Chris was saying IoT, there are all of these privacy things, all these security things. It needs a lot of skill to solve these. That just means we haven't got it right yet. We need to make it easier to build those things so that more people can do it. I don't think we're going to get into the realm of everyone programming all the time. Back when I was at youth club in the late 80s, early 90s, I had a youth club leader who was a few years older than me, and when I was saying I'm going to be a programmer, I didn't really know the term software engineer at the time. I'm going to be a programmer. He said, oh, it's a dying industry because these fourth generation languages are coming along, and then no one will need programmers anymore. And so when I heard about Chris talking about this CA Gen or whatever it's called, I thought, yeah, I've heard this story before. We're all still here, guys. Sorry, I would like to correct myself and say we're all still here, folks. I am trying to train myself out of saying guys as if it's gender neutral, and if I embarrass myself by making a point of correcting myself, hopefully I will teach myself. Okay, so we're all still here. I can't see the systems level coding, the details of application level coding going away. I think that more and more people will be able to do some simple bits and pieces, and what we think of as simple will change over time. So maybe people will want to program their house so that when they drive up in their car, it starts charging, except on a Friday night because they know that something else is happening on a Friday night. And maybe if you've put date night in the calendar, then it turns down the lights a bit, puts some mood music on and all that kind of thing. Maybe people will program things like that for themselves. Absolutely. But I don't see the role of programmer going away anytime soon. So I guess my mission statement for the future of tech is make cool tech boring. We can still find it fun, but it should just get out of the way for everyday users. Remember, the point is to solve people's problems, even problems that they don't know they have. Well, I'm really serious about this. I didn't realize that I had a mapping problem. I used to, and again, if many of you 20 years younger than me, you'll think this is absolutely crazy. If I used to have to drive somewhere, sometimes I would have to go to the local shop and buy a map for this area, a paper map, so that I would know where I'm going, and I'd never use that map after that one trip. And I would have to do that, a week in advance or whatever to make sure I could get the map. I didn't know I had a mapping problem because that was just how we got from A to B. And I was grateful that there was the map. And then I got a GPS and a sat-nav, and it was great. I could go from A to B, except it didn't know when there'd been an accident on a motorway. So it didn't know to reroute me. I didn't know I had a mapping problem. I had this great new mapping technology, and I could get from A to B so long as there wasn't an accident. Now, Google Maps will tell me where there's a load of traffic. Oh no, there's been an accident, we'll reroute you. Do I still have a mapping problem? Probably. I don't know what it is. So maybe one of you is going to fix that for me, and I say thank you in advance for doing so. So it's perfectly fine to address people's problems that they don't know they have. But you're not giving them tech, you're giving them solution to a problem. Sometimes the solution to the problem might not even be tech. I'll give you a quick example. I write to-do lists. So every day I will say, right, well, today I need to release a new version of this and fix that bug and write a document about this, partly because I do a lot of context switching between multiple things within my role. I could use Google Keep. It's a great little note-taking app. I use Google Keep all the time in restaurants. If I'm having to order, we've got 5 people in our family because I've got 3 children. If we're each ordering a starter and a main course and a drink, I can't remember 15 things anymore. So we'll write it all down on a Keep note, and then I can just hand it to the person at the till, and they can put all the order through. It's great. But I don't use that for my to-do list. What do you think I use? Pardon? Trello. Good idea, but no, I use paper and pen. And when I've done something, I put a little tick mark, and that's great. And then, this is where it sounds really bad, at the end of the week, because I try to keep track, partly so that my manager can see if they're interested, but also so I can look back when I'm going for promotion or whatever and see what have I done. I transfer that list into snippets at work, and I just type it up, and that's really not a problem. But the right solution to the problem for me is to have the notebook next to me so that I don't have to switch between browser windows or anything. So that's the what of the future. What about how we're going to code? So I've sort of hinted a little bit about this already in terms of the changes we've seen in the past. And I think that we will still be writing code in text. I think we will still be using keyboards to do that. And I think we will still be using monitors of some kind. We will still be seeing our code on a surface. Now, maybe that will be projected instead of on a TFT or whatever. Really, how much does it matter to you whether your code appears on this or on the wall? Is that going to be a marked difference to how you think about your job? I would suggest not. It may well make a difference as to how easily you can code in a coffee shop, for example, but it's not a massive shift. But I do think lots of things will change in the people aspect. So these days, I work from home about 4 days a week. And when I say from home, I mean from my shed. My wife is a children's author, so she has a little study, and there isn't room in our house for 2 studies, so at the bottom of our garden we had a new shed built, and it's a shed in 2 halves. There's the sort of sheddy bit with lawnmowers and things in, and then I've got my home office part of the shed. And most sheds don't have an air conditioner and an ice cream maker and a Miro print and surround sound and things. So when I say shed, I do mean home office. But I work from home 4 days a week and go into the office 1 day a week if I'm not coming somewhere else. I haven't been in the office this week. That's fine, because I've still seen my colleagues a lot. I've seen them in chats, on Hangouts, and in video conferences. And I would like to think that that will happen more. Not just because it means I get more time at home. You know, it's great because my wife works from home as well. Means I can see her every lunchtime. You know, how many couples get to see each other every lunchtime? It's fantastic. But also think about, I'm not taking a seat on a train. I'm not driving a car. I'm not taking up office space. Now, as it happens, there is an empty desk where I would normally be 4 days a week. But maybe that doesn't have to be the way of things. Imagine how many of our traffic problems and the pollution that comes from that and the energy use and the materials used to make cars, etc. Imagine if all the jobs that could be done from home, and certainly not all are, you know, I don't imagine that a steel worker is likely to be able to, I'll just have a little foundry at home and produce my little bits of steel. No. You know, I can't see coal mines becoming home-based working anytime soon, unless you happen to live on a coal mine. But there are an awful lot of jobs, huge numbers of jobs, that could be done largely from home. Face-to-face interaction, as in physical face-to-face interaction, is really important. At the end of October, I'm going over to Seattle so that I can be in the same room with more of my colleagues. You know, we have some in London and some in Seattle, and it's good to get together every so often. But it doesn't have to be all the time. When I go into the office and come back, that's about 3 to 3.5 hours of my working day is traveling. I am so much more productive at home. And I don't have as many interruptions from another team that's talking about other things. So I reckon that home working will come more. And to come back to the question that I asked Chris about how do we unlock other continents, and I'm thinking particularly of Africa, but not only Africa. I haven't worked with anyone who's still living in South America, for example. As soon as you've got more of a remote-based working environment, that becomes so much easier. You still need all the work of universities, of companies hiring, all kinds of things to unlock that potential. But you don't need to make room for them in an already overcrowded city. So this unlocks a lot of possibilities for diversity around ethnicity, also potentially age. I would like to retire at sort of 55, I think. That sounds good to me. But I expect I will still be coding. And maybe every so often, I might even take a contract. I've never been a contractor, but maybe if someone would like to hire me to do a bit of work, that would be great. Well, if I'm 70, I may not find it as easy to go around, and even a trip to London would feel quite tricky at that point, I suspect. Maybe I'd do it occasionally, but it's going to be so much easier if they can say, you do it from home, we'll have video conferences. Suddenly you've got whole generations that are currently massively undervalued. One more boundary is being removed. You see how it all works? You know how I said at the start that it's all about the people? Everything is about how people will change. So, that's my thoughts about the future. I have no idea how much I've overrun by. Oh, I'm not too bad. You have patiently listened to the ramblings of a 41-year-old white male with 41-year-old white male experiences, UK-based 41-year-old white male. Your guess as to the future is as good as mine, and I'd like to leave you with one final thought, which is the future won't happen to us, the future will happen through us. So I've given some ideas about the future I would like to happen, and I'm doing what I can in a very small way to try to make that future happen. Think about what future you want to happen, and then go and be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was awesome. We've got some time now for some Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, I thought the hands might go up a little bit. We'll go around and...
Anyone reading questions off Stack Overflow so they can then type my answer in? Yeah, it's okay.
Hello. Thank you for the speech. It was very interesting. But I would like to ask you not about tech being in the background, because we are tech people, right?
Right.
So my question is tech savior. So if we watch your presentation, we have like a boom in the tech and a boom in IT. There is a lot of hype, a lot of new technologies, a lot of buzzwords, etc., etc., etc. So I have two questions. What's your favorite big next thing? But your favorite big next thing is the thing that you have a passion to. Maybe it's not that will make a big change. And what is the next big thing which will make a change in the IT world from your perspective?
Okay, so the next big thing that I want to do is actually revamping an old thing. And this actually comes back to Stack Overflow that I was mentioning before, and we may go into it this afternoon in the round table. I think we have a problem in terms of diagnostic skills. So let's just do a quick sample. So you're all, how many of you are currently in some sort of learning capacity, so you're students of whether it's computer science or software engineering or whatever. Okay. So, right, sorry, keep your hands up for the moment, because I just want to see how, right, how many of you, keep your hands up if you do unit testing? Okay, I'm particularly interested in the students here, I'll come back to why, right, and use source control, so GitHub or just Git elsewhere, yeah? This is good, it looks like most of the students do. That's not always the case in the UK. Because we have a lot of people learning computer science. And computer science courses are all about things like compiler internals and data structures and algorithms, and things that are really important and interesting, but that don't teach you to be a good programmer, a good software engineer. So I have talked at universities. I gave a talk, in fact, saying that was entitled "Things You're Not Going to Learn in Your Computer Science Course That You Need as an IT engineer, a programmer or software engineer." And I asked there, and one person was doing unit testing, and I think 3 people, out of a room of about 40 people, about 3 people were using source control. It's like, this is weird. It's like everyone in the industry, at least everyone in the industry who I run into, knows about, at least feels bad if they're not using source control and testing. And the other skill, as well as learning about those, is how to do problem solving. So if I run into a problem, I know what I do, I know my process for saying, okay, I've got this big application, something's going wrong, I will cut it down to, well, it's somewhere in there, somewhere in there, somewhere in there, and maybe it's a web application, but the problem has nothing to do with the fact that it is a web application, so I'll reproduce it in a console environment because that's easier to debug. And this is something I'm really passionate about because I see so many people on Stack Overflow who appear not to know how to do this. And you can't tell whether they know how to do it but they're too lazy to do it, which I'm sure is the case for some people, or they just don't know where to start. So I am trying, through blog posts and conference talks and probably some other writing and screencasts and things, I want to bring back the idea of learning where problems are, which I suspect, coming from a background with rubbish tools, you get forced to learn how to do that. If you don't have a good debugger to start with, you learn how to debug code by putting print statements frequently. And that's still a useful thing to be able to do, because sometimes your debugger won't work, or you'll have a problem that only shows itself when you're not debugging. And this sort of goes back to what I said about typing in code from magazines. Some of the things that seem really primitive, I think, helped me to be a better engineer. And I'm trying to spread the word about that kind of thing, and I could do with all of your help. So if you feel that you don't currently know enough about diagnostic skills, if you get stuck and think, I have no idea where within this 500-line program the problem is, then if you search, I recorded a Channel 9 video about this about 2 days ago, and we'll probably talk about it more later on, and look at my blog and all kinds of things. So if you're in the situation where you need to learn and then share with other people. If you're already pretty competent at this kind of thing and you see someone else struggling, don't just say, oh, the problem's there. Don't just do it for them. Instead say, right, let's sit down. Instead of fixing it in 5 minutes, we're going to take half an hour to fix it, and next time you'll be able to fix it yourself. Take the time. If we can spread that message, I think we can raise software engineering significantly. So that was the first part of the question. Second one, in terms of what big thing for tech? Well, cloud and IoT are sort of the obvious ones. I'm a big fan of cloud because I work in cloud. I think cloud will be easier and easier. When App Engine started, Google App Engine, before the idea of a public cloud was a thing, really, it came with the notion of, give us your code and we will run it for you. And that's at its heart what cloud is all about. And we've gone through, in order to make it so that you're not just running toy things, but these are production systems, you want service level agreements, you want all kinds of security, cryptography, whatever. We've made things more complicated. So now we need to make things simpler again. So it's give me your code and really simply explain to me your constraints. And then that's where cloud's going, I think. I heard a great analogy of where cloud is and where it's going, which is like cars. So a long time ago, when you started a car, you had to use what was called a choke. And so you'd be balancing, right, well, I'm changing into first gear and using the clutch and using the choke, otherwise it would stall. And then we got past that and we didn't need a choke anymore. And we had manual gearboxes still, so I still need to use the clutch and change from first to second, etc. And that's probably where we were a few years ago in cloud. We're now closer to an automatic gearbox car that you've still got to brake and put your foot down and drive. And where we should be going is self-driving car. What's the cloud equivalent of a self-driving car? So that's where I'm looking in terms of cloud. Again, it's a matter of getting the tech out of the way of I want to go from A to B. Cool, thank you. That was a very long answer to a short question.
Hello, thank you for the presentation, and my question is about the growth of cities. So if we will look at the technology, it seems that remote working is becoming easier and easier, and for some reason the big cities as London, Moscow, and I don't know, are growing bigger and bigger, and the small cities that used to thrive are decaying. Why do you think this happens?
Firstly, I'd like to add a disclaimer that just like I had no qualifications for the rest of my speech, I have no qualifications for anything around geopolitical things. I think one problem is that I still go into the office once a week, so I need to be close enough that that's feasible. And if we can get past that boundary, if we can get so that electronic communication is so seamless that you could be living in the middle of nowhere and work just as effectively as being able to see people once a week, then that would be an enormous help. I think it's also that even though working remotely has become a lot more feasible and a lot more desirable, I was speaking to someone who works for Stack Overflow but has worked on the jobs side of it, and apparently one of the absolute top requests for software engineers when they say, what's important to you? Is it salary? Is it working in a particular tech field? Is it all these things? Remote working is one of the most highly desirable features, and it's one of the things that fewest companies offer. So I think to a large extent, companies need to catch up. Just like we need to catch up on diversity, we need to catch up on remote working. And trusting people. A lot of it comes down to, well, if I know they're in the office, then I can see that they're working and stand behind their monitor and go, are you done yet? And no one actually does that. No one stands behind and says, are you done yet? But they like to know they can, I think. So I think a lot is companies need to grow up on that front, and investors as well. So if you're going to try to attract investors, then you get an office in a city and the investors come to that, and you go to investment events that are in the big cities and things. And I don't know how we break out of that vicious cycle, but I would say that it doesn't need to. I could imagine cities becoming business hubs that don't need to be worker hubs, if that makes any sense. So maybe business people need to get together more often. Maybe you need to have some presence that would hopefully be smaller. If you've got 5,000 remote workers and maybe 100 of them need to be in the office on any one day, then maybe you build an office that's big enough for 200 people to be on the safe side. You don't build one that's big enough for 5,000 people. So your requirements reduce. That's my theory. But yeah, I think a lot of it is companies catching up to that. And I hope that it does happen. I hope we get more even population density. And we have the same problem in the UK, what we call the north-south divide. And I would hope that remote working will help with that. So fingers crossed it's just a matter of playing catch up for the next 10 years, but we'll see. I completely understand it as a problem though. Or rather, understand that it is a problem.
John, thanks. I would like to ask you about, since you talk about future, I would like to, nowadays code generators not so well, they do really a good job, but not always. My question is it possible that in the near future, 20, 30 years, an AI will take our job, will do the code for us? Is it possible? As your fault, just your fault?
Maybe. I hope not. Code generators, I actually work on a code generator at the moment. So if Google has a protocol called gRPC and all our new APIs, things like Cloud Vision API is defined in terms of gRPC, and we have code generation to try to make that as seamless to work with as possible. And has that removed part of my job? Yes, but it's removed a really boring part. So I would hope that AI will be able to remove the boring bits of our job, and along with other tools around monitoring and alerting and things that should help us improve our code quality. But I don't suspect that AI will make us all redundant. It will just make our jobs better. It's my hope. I'm a natural optimist, though.
Thanks, John. I have actually two questions. First one, what do you think about trend in chatbots? Like your thoughts, how big is trend and how long should we expect to have it? And the second question, it's actually for my friends developers. So how to become Chuck Norris in programming?
Okay, so the first one was about chatbots. Yeah? Chatbots. I know very little about chatbots, I'm afraid, so really, really little. I would say that if we expand it to digital assistants in general, it's really easy to just have a few ideas and just keep coming back to them. So I'll do exactly that now and say the best kind of chatbot or digital assistant is one that gets out of your way as quickly as possible. So if you want to achieve something, you should be able to express that in as natural a way as possible. The chatbot will do whatever it is, whether that's putting you in touch with another person, shock horror, people talking to each other, or book you a taxi, whatever it is. If it can do that and get out of your way, that's the ideal. I have no idea what the trend is like in terms of third-party plugins for things, I'm afraid. In terms of leveling up your skills, my advice would first be to learn the basics and learn them well. So this is precisely the kind of diagnostics that I was talking about before. I would encourage you to, if you're using a language, then at least know where the specification is. Not everyone is quite as enthralled by the C# specification as I am. I think it's a fantastic document, really, really well written. The sort of primary author, Mads Torgersen, is, well, A, he's clearly a genius. B, he's a really, really nice person. He's just the kindest, most friendly person you could hope to meet. I'm privileged to call him a friend. But you should know where to look. So you should avoid what has been called cargo cult programming of, right, I will look on Stack Overflow, I see there's the answer, I will copy and paste it, and I never need to understand it. If you have code that you don't understand, that's a problem. So understand it, understand how to address problems. Beyond that, people ask whether they should go broad or deep. And that's entirely your choice. So I'm not a full stack developer. If you've looked at any HTML I've written, I apologize. It's terrible. I have one bit of JavaScript that I'm quite pleased with, which is if you copy and paste a string into the browser, it will show you the every character in that string, including surrogate pairs and non-printable characters, and it will show you what are the UTF-16 code units and what's the UTF-8 representation and things, and that's quite good, but that's the only bit of JavaScript that I've ever done that I'm proud of. And that was painful to do. So I'm not broad, I'm just deep. I do C# and I do Java, and I haven't been really paying attention to Java. Other people, if you want to be a full stack developer, more power to you, and I am in awe of your skills already. So do something you love. If you're trying to learn something that you find boring, that will not go well for you. So find something interesting and throw yourself into it. I think that's probably enough platitudes. Yeah. There's just a few rows back has been raising their hand for a while.
Thanks for your speech. Everyone who wants to achieve success, every day try to find motivation to work hard. My question is, what things motivate you day by day to update your knowledge or to update your knowledge?
That's fine. And this is actually one of the things I ask when I'm interviewing candidates for Google. The first question I ask is, what makes you get up in the morning and want to do software? Which is sort of a précis of what you're asking, I think. It varies. I like doing cool things, where cool can be something I might find cool but no one else would. So, as an example, I'm very interested in time zones. One of the things I meant to say earlier on is that for all the things that do change in software engineering, I know that the common thing to say is that the only two difficult things in computer science are cache invalidation and naming, but it seems to me that the three difficult things in software engineering are localization and accessibility, versioning, and time zones. And I find time zones particularly interesting and have had endless fun both building node at a time and building things to check that different bits of software validate the same time zone data in the same way. No one else finds that interesting, but I do. I'm interested in C# language details, so if someone comes to me with a Stack Overflow question saying, here's my code, it looks like it should do X, but it actually does Y. And if I look at it and say, yeah, I think it should do X as well, and I delve into the language specification, that's me happy for hours. Okay, so that definitely motivates me. I also like enabling other people to do things. So that's why I like writing about diagnostics, why I like contributing on Stack Overflow. It sounds like I'm trying to say that I'm a really nice person for this, but it makes me happy. So maybe it's just selfish of me to empower other people because it makes me happy. For whatever reason, I don't know, but I find that a great thing. And that's one of the things I love about my job at Google at the moment is I'm building libraries that let you build awesome products that use Google Cloud Platform. So I won't give details, but a friend of mine was telling me just the other day about a product that they're writing using one of our machine learning APIs. It's like, that's such a cool application. I would never have built it. I would never have thought of building it, but I can completely see how you're using the API, and I'm letting you do that. How cool is that? So that's enough motivation for me.
Okay, we've unfortunately run out of time. Let's show our appreciation for John and his...
And thank you for welcoming me into your beautiful city.
We have an opportunity later for a smaller, intimate group John's going to run a round table with us. There may still be places left it's been about 2:30, so go to registration if you're interested. But like I say, I think the places may have all gone. So now I just want to hopefully invite Anna to come up. Who is Anna available? Yes, fantastic. So Anna, I just want to say, will tell us a little about our partners who have helped us to run this event, to give you a little bit more information about Attic and what they're doing.
Basically, I'll not take too much time because people are already leaving. So, first of all, I want to say, dear tech community, welcome to Tech Bowl, because this is great to see so many faces and so many smart guys coming together to listen to John and to all the other good people. Thank you, Amdaris, in special, because you made it happen. And I would like you to give a round of applause to Amdaris and to Vlad, who are here, and his team. So please do that. Basically, all we do in Attic and in TechWell is actually for you, for the IT to happen in Moldova. There are many, many more initiatives that will happen. This is a very nice project that we did with the Technical University with the support of USAID and Sweden. But not only, there are many other people helping out to do things happen here. I really hope you enjoy the conference today. I really hope you come back anytime you need something and you want to do something in tech or entrepreneurship. And I really was inspired together with my team, because out of the 20 people, I probably have 15 girls who do things for the tech community. So John, you inspired the girls to do more. So come back whenever you need anything in that sense. And enjoy the day. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. We're now going to break for coffee, so opportunity to network and chat, and we will come back around 11:45 for the next half of presentations. We believe every line of code has a reason to exist.
Every solution should improve what went before.
And that the best solutions should evolve and develop over time. At the heart of our vision is a belief that the software we develop becomes alive in the environments it is used.
Amdaris has a vision which the future will be built on.
Providing people access to better healthcare.
Connecting the dots in complex supply chains.
Supporting the transfer of millions of financial transactions.
Allowing peace of mind for provision of insurance.
Ensuring large-scale infrastructure projects can function effectively. Providing insights to assist people and businesses on their journey of growth.
Helping people find employment.
Supporting the education of millions of people around the world. Our vision is to support our clients in bringing positive change to the world we live in.
As we work together with a vision to bring digital change, we will grow new leaders who will inspire others to excellence.
Each one of us plays a part in that journey. Together, we are the future. Welcome back. I want to introduce now Alessia, who's one of our team leads. She's going to come and share her story of her career and the challenges and the way she's overcome those challenges. Alessia.
Hello everyone. My name is Alessia, as I said. I am a wife, a mom, a daughter, a sister, and also I accumulate the position of delivery lead at Amdaris. Today I want to tell you about my journey from a stay-at-home mom to a delivery lead, about why I think women in IT have all the same opportunities as men, and about some of my lessons learned during my way. Some of them were hard learning by making mistakes. Others were simple experience. But all those lessons made me the woman and the professional I am today. I went to technical university, IT faculty, and at that time there were still strong stereotypes that women is not for girls, it's too hard, too complicated for us. And I have been told that I will quit during the first year. But as strange as could be, I graduated. And yes, we were just 9 girls in a group of about 50 students, but not very good. But happily now things are changing, and I see now that gender is less and less relevant to choosing the college or the university. Being a student, we learned that it doesn't matter who we are. It's important how we are. It's important to find what you like the best. Any person who is really passionate about computers and science should go for it. There are some wonderful professors who taught us that with enough desire and willingness to improve, everything can be learned and done beautifully regardless of gender. It's about keeping our mind open and willingness to improve constantly. Well, besides technologies, I loved people always, and I got energized by communication and human interaction. So after graduating, I got hired in a large company where I were maintaining a huge and tricky system. It wasn't the job of my dream, I'll be honest, but one of the best parts there is that I had to closely work with about 300 people. It was hard and it was challenging, but I loved very much this aspect of my job. And at that time, I realized how important it is to find what you like and do what you love. So after a while, a new very important person came into my life. That's my son. So basically in one moment he became the center of my life, the light of my eyes, and my career went on second or maybe on 10th place for a short time. Well, I was planning that it would be for a short time, but the stars and the VIP thought otherwise, so I got stuck home for 5 long years. During this time, I also learned lots of things, like the art of knitting, several different languages, toddler ones, and how to be calm and zen when it's a complete chaos around. But as you can understand, during all this time, I went 1,000 miles away from technologies and IT. Remote control toys aren't counted. And when time came for me to get back to work, I was just frightened. I thought that I got so stupid that I wanted to go further than 5 minutes of the interview. But at that point, I got so much support from my husband, and I realized how important it is in critical situations to have somebody to encourage you, to support you, to push you forward. And even more important is to accept that help, because doing everything alone is not the best solution and it wouldn't bring the best results. So I got all my courage, I sent some CVs, and here I am at Amdaris as junior QA. At first it was quite hard. I had to remember all that I knew and what I didn't. But during about 2 years as a QA engineer in different projects, I learned a lot. I got so much support and I improved my skills. I got here not just colleagues, I got friends, which I love. So everything went smooth. I was feeling calm, sweet, in my comfort zone. And about a year ago, I was assigned to my current project as team lead. And the storm came. Suddenly, everything became so differently. So many new tasks were to be done. And I realized that all that I knew, it wasn't enough. And it was confusing and frustrating because I didn't know where to start. But I calmed down and I realized that it's a moment when I have to start learning again and move forward. Being a tester, I always had to have a destructive mindset, to find bugs, to find ways to break the application which developers done. This is why they don't love testers. But now, in my new role, I came that I have to switch my mind. I have to change my point of view to the project. I have to get things together instead of finding ways to break them. And I had to gather our clients' requirements, to deal with continuously changing priorities, to deal with tough deadlines, to get everything together to deliver clear specification to developers. And in all this, I had to keep everybody happy. It is still challenging, and I am still learning how to do it the best way. I always thought that I have good communication skills, I can make relationships, I can make friends, but now being surrounded by all these super smart, sharp and tough guys, you all know how IT guys could be, I realized that I have so much to adopt and to refine. And one of the most hard to learn lesson was to shut my mouth and listen. Just listen without commenting everything, even with face expression. Because usually those people who always disagree or always find ways to get me out of it, they always bring such powerful and groundbreaking ideas. I realized that usually all best decisions weren't taken by one person. They were taken by groups of people who knew how to listen to each other. Being a team leader, I also learned one important thing, that leadership is not about telling people what to do. Usually developers know very well what to do and how to do it the best way. The trick is to be the person who can inspire people and keep them motivated. To get them the why are we doing this, why we care of this project, why we want it flawless. It's so important to believe in what you're doing and to get people around you believe in it as well. One big discovery and revelation for me was that customer could be our friend and should be our friend. I had the happy chance to get a demanding, volcanic and impatient customer, but I can also say that I got a good friend and also a teacher. He has broad experience and he taught us so much from his experience. He's inspiring us each and every day. He can point out to good things even if it seems that everything is awful and falling apart. He can motivate us. I sometimes think he can get a rock to get up and motivate itself. And one thing to remember for me was that customer is not just a business. Customer is a person with emotions, with prejudices, with biases, sometimes with blood pressure, especially when life fails. And we, as developers, our role is to feel his pain, to get his needs, to get the why is he doing what he does. And this way, we as a development team can better fit our talents into their needs. And so I got that for delivering really great things, it's not enough to be us and them. We have to bring customer and developer teams working together, go to a symbiosis, and do great things together and be so proud of what we have done. So for keeping the fact that I won the customer service award at some point really means a lot for me, because in this sense it means that I am on the right track and we as a large team are doing the right job, working smooth and productively together. But for keeping the right course, I know that I have to remember that I have to improve myself. I have to sustain a constant effort of improving. I have to remember to keep my eyes and mind open for new things and my heart open for new people. I have to remember that my weaknesses are not my enemies, they are my friends. I just have to face them, and there is always room for being better. I have to know my vulnerabilities and work on them. It's a short presentation, so I want to finish with saying that I'm considering myself a lucky person. Why? Because I have a loved family. I love my job. But very, very important is that I always had the opportunity to learn. I had people around me who shared from their wise and their experience. I had situations which pushed me forward out of my comfort zone. So it doesn't matter who we are, males or females, seniors or juniors, IT or medicine. It's important to improve ourselves, to keep our minds open, accept our challenges, and you'll have no other choice but to succeed and to be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessia. Thanks very much. Has anyone got any questions for Alessia?
Hi.
Hi, Talek.
So, what was your biggest disappointment in your career?
My biggest disappointment? I think maybe a disappointment was that I moved from at one point I had to move from my track. I was thinking that I will be a wonderful tester. I will go to automation and to security testing. I moved in other part and I realized that I don't have time for developing that skills. But I hope maybe sometimes I will be back.
Alessia, thank you for that. That was really, really interesting and very inspiring. The question that I've got really is about your perspective. So you went away from technology and you had a whole bunch of other perspectives. Do you think that helped you to work with your customer and to be more aware of other perspectives and how to bring those into the team?
About perspective for our team now? Well, the thing is that how I see now the team, I am at the beginning of team leadership, let's say like this. The perspective are to get the team more diversified and in technologies, because usually developers are going on one track, and sometimes they should be get out from their shelf and to see that we can do better things, more interesting things, other ways. And well, this is one of my perspectives.
Hi, Alessia.
Hi, Anna.
For all the young ladies that are here and they want to start a career in IT, what's the piece of advice that you would give to them?
This is the piece of advice. If you are really interested and passionate about this, just go for it. You will do very well, because it's not a rocket science, how was told in that video. You just have to learn and to improve each and every day.
Corresponding question, what advice would you give to the young men in the audience to help encourage the young women?
To help encourage the young women? Just to let them do what they are doing, because they are doing very well. You know, usually we have situations that, I'll do it better. No, just don't do. You can give an advice, you can point something, but let them do. Let girls do what they do.
Cool, thank you.
Alessia, thank you for the wonderful talk. And my question is, so considering that you have like a work and family, how do you manage the work and life balance?
I was waiting for this question. Well, how I manage? One of the part of my life is the sentiment, I don't know if it's the right word, of guilty before my son, because sometimes I don't spend enough time with him. So I think I don't spend enough time. Maybe he doesn't need it. But other part is that I always try to, when I am in the family, I am all there. So to spend quality time with my son, with my husband, to go walking, to play games. This is the trick, I think.
Great, let's give Alessia a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now I want to invite Yuri up, who's going to he's going to talk to us about abstractions, and hope it's going to be, for you developers, it's going to be an opportunity to get into a little bit more detail. So welcome, Yuri. Now, you're going to have to juggle the microphone as well. I'll try and give you a hand.
Okay, so I will add to the diversity of this conference by doing a bit more technical talk, a bit more to the point, not too far technical, but at least a bit technical. So please tune in for a different mood, to be more serious. So the key topic of this conference, or the leitmotif of this conference, is developing a digital future. So what does it have to do with the leak abstractions, you might think? Here you go.
We'll try and sort that buzzing out as soon as possible.
Let me go on. So this is the leak abstraction. It's really good it happened. So basically it's something that has already leaked in practice. So yeah, as I was saying, we are developing a digital future, but as engineers, not only software engineers, have been facing different challenges. And one of them is that the abstractions that they create will leak. And I would like to show you the consequences, how to embrace the pain that your pipe leaks, because it's very painful when it happens to your house, and to your software. So this is a classic topic, which has been alongside with the developers, is, and I think will be. No, this thing doesn't work. I have to tune something into my computer. Okay, so let me present myself. I'm Yuri. I'm a software engineer at Alessia. I'm very passionate of technology, of deep reflections, and especially my main passion is databases. So I like to do public speaking. Being both at the receiving, but also especially at the giving end of it. And I have several public talks already, and what I'm preparing is a Microsoft SQL internals workshop. So if you're interested in such workshop, you might contact me. If you're interested in working at Alessia, you might contact me. If you're interested in just some database SQL stuff, I would be glad to help. Maybe some consultancy, etc. Okay, so now let's start with abstractization. I will ask everybody to close their eyes and imagine a dog. Okay, and I will ask some of you to describe the dog, to describe its breed. So who wants to describe just a dog he has imagined?
A German Shepherd.
Any description?
I have imagined white dog, yes, with black. Sorry. Okay, guys.
Any other interesting dogs you have imagined?
I don't know their space, so I will describe it. It's a black dog, big one, and it's scary.
Yes?
Yahoo. Yeah, it's name of my pet.
Okay. So, you see, we have different ideas of what is a dog, have a different view of what is a dog, and we have different thoughts which we, using terms and words to describe the real world. We have our own thought process, which we, using the words and terms, maybe some other means, mimics, describe the real world. But still, we all have the dog in mind. So from that concept of some abstract dog, we took what's essential for us and what is a dog, and have imagined something which is a dog. So this is basically abstraction in a nutshell. So taking away the characteristics of a complex object, focusing on essential characteristics, reducing to what makes that a dog. This is a very interesting thing, and this is generally how humans model and create thoughts in their head. And this is, of course, a pivotal thing in software engineering, because it's a technique for arranging complexity of computer systems. We establish a level of complexity of interacting with a thing, and we let the users be on that level. And there are very lots of examples. So it can be that we always interact with the computer systems from the keyboard or from the input touch device. Or it can be some library that we interact with to access databases like an ORM. Or it can be anything else. So basically, there is a level of complexity which is hidden, and we need to try to make it simpler in order for it to be more widespread and accessible to the wide range of developers. So abstraction is not only an engineering thing. There's always also an era of abstractionism in art. So the main idea, one of the main ideas of abstractionism was giving the viewer the freedom to imagine and achieve harmony through colors and geometrical forms. So what we can see on these pictures, most of us will say that this is a cat and this is some woman's face. Some might see a forest, some might see anything else, something else. So it's the power of visualization. Power of visualization, which is very important, and which somebody says that it divides people into two halves. So when I'm talking about something, you always have the power to visualize almost my every word. And those people who can do it, they are very good at accepting the abstractions. So you can say that if you closer to the right side of this image, you are closer to a very good imagination. And I always try to visualize almost everything which people say to me. For example, if someone says it rains cats and dogs, I imagine the cats and dogs which are rained. And this is not only in any language and anything which is said to me. And this is a very powerful technique. I think visualization is very important, and one of the ways to make the abstractions less leakier. So you can see that the abstraction of text and speech is much higher than an image or a video. So, for example, you can compare how a dog, an abstract thing, gets less abstract and even less abstract when we use a concrete dog. So when we use images in narratives, we minimize this abstraction. And now I have introduced what an abstraction is. I'll talk about what Joel Spolsky has introduced in his blog a long time ago, and that the law of leaky abstractions, that all non-trivial abstractions to some degree are leaky. And this is a very painful thing. This means that you can't hide really all the complicated details and keep the level of interaction with the thing you have engineered and it can't be abstracted away, and it will be leaking through the higher level concepts. So that's why as an engineer I always love the details. I hate magic and I love the details, how it works. I mean, I hate the magic in the sense when I don't understand it. As John has said, if you have a piece of software in your system and you don't understand what this code does, this is a problem. This is a problem for me too. So let's start with simple examples. So start the TV set example. And like we have started the talk example, then the sound was blown. Yeah. So in theory, starting the TV set is very easy. You just click a button on the remote control. And what could possibly go wrong? It's simple, right? So remote control batteries might stop functioning, or it might get lost. A TV signal of the operator might get lost because of bad weather. You might have to switch the TV source. You might have to start the TV tuner. Your TV might get broken. You might have forgotten to pay your subscription fee, so you can't watch the channels you have subscribed to anymore. So the list may go on, and still it's not that vast. It will work in most of the cases, and that abstraction is not that leaky, after all. But that shows what a leaky abstraction is. So basically, we have established a level of interaction with the system to be a remote control, and that level of interaction will not always work. So now let's go to the next example. So in 2010, number of cars in the world surpassed 1 billion. It's crazy. It's really crazy, 1 billion of cars. And driving a car is simple. What can go wrong? So it can be a technical fault. Check engine, brakes. Manufacturer started to introduce electrical diagnosis to your cars. So you as the user of your car can deal easily with the leak. You might have to accelerate quickly, and that will require choosing lower gear speed, for example. Or the driving surface might require special driving. For example, aquaplaning, braking on the ice, road with gravel, or just a bad Moldavian road. It all might happen. So now just imagine that instead of driving a car, you need to fly the plane. I still remember that time when I launched my first plane flight simulator, and I was just blown away by the level of complexity it comes with, and by all the things I needed to do to start and launch that plane. So I never got to be good at it. Yeah, because planes are clearly less trivial than driving a car. It's far more complicated. So, but there are also some side effects of the complexities. So, once again, I repeat, we have 1 billion cars on this planet. Crazy. Can the Earth handle that? Can we as a planet handle that? So, it leads to ecological disasters. It leads to complex crossroads like you see on the right. It leads to fuel consumption, which is non-recoverable resource. So we now invent different types of fuels, which are not that widely spread. And we invent the new transport of future, multi-height buses. And maybe many other consequences which comes out of the abstraction of just driving a car or introducing a car to mass public. So as you can see, the consequences are big, and all the abstractions leak. Even the simplest abstractions you have seen will leak, and I will try to show you what are the leaks. So the first consequence of the leak is a poor performance in a slow system. So there are different types of leaks. I'll just give you some examples. So in most of the systems I have worked with, the database is a bottleneck, because people don't understand how databases work technically, and it's a problem. Another problem is developing systems with high concurrency needs. But you don't need to go that far. It can be not caching JavaScript. It can be not minifying JavaScript. It can be not bundling the scripts. It can be anything you start with, and you don't understand how the things works under the hood, and you introduce slowness to the system. Of course, you can't know everything, but Second consequence is doing things inefficiently and without understanding, aka cargo cult. This is a big problem, a problem that I hate. And people have a problem, be it with performance or anything else in the software system, and they come to the office and try to solve it in a naive way. Solving things in a naive way is very bad. So, for example, you need to add error handling to an MVC application, and you go through all the actions and start wrapping them in a try-catch. That's just a waste of human effort. So I once worked on a system, let's say that it was a big transaction store, and they had a very big table in the database, so they didn't understand a simple fact how databases work, and it was slow. So since it was a huge table, they split it by months. So they had copies of the tables like orders by May 2016, orders by June 2016, orders by July 2016. And all was fancy until they decided to predict something, and they needed to move all these tables for prediction into one big data source. But I just imagine the job of a man who creates this thing, who comes from his family daily to his work, and feels motivated to do something without understanding. That's very bad. So, for example, you can see in these comics, so they had no horrible bug in the code base. So what was it? So the function getToday day connects to a table day of years, which has a line for every day from 2008 to 2015. It looks nasty. So how did they fix it? So he added the days for 2016 and 2017, and an alert which will remind at the end of 2017 to add more days for 2018 and 19. This is an example of a cargo cult. So they didn't fix the root of the cause of the problem. So what they did is they fought the windmills. Because it looks nice. So a man on a horse goes into the windmill with force to fight it. It looks nice, but in reality it looks like this. It looks stupid. You don't want to be doing it on your daily job. You don't want to look like that guy. The third consequence is not modeling the cases, all the corner cases right. It can be corner cases of the third-party system on some, I don't know, external library. It can be corner case of an app you are building. For example, you are building a taxi app, and this taxi can be ordered to get your flight to an airport. And you know that with the flights you want to be on time always. So everything is fancy and works fine until we come with daylight saving time, for example. And suddenly your taxi arrives 1 hour earlier or 1 hour later, and someone misses his flight. Yes. So another good example happened lately is with this left pad library on NPM. Because when it was removed, such libraries as React, Babel, and other tons of libraries have fallen. So there is very good articles on the internet right now. You can Google and just see some research of the people what nasty stuff is happening on the NPM. Not criticizing NPM, but just saying that the corner cases are very important. So it all comes down that it's very important to understand the corner cases. And there is a very classic book, Mythical Man Month by Frederick Brooks. If you haven't read that, I encourage you to do so. So it was written like 40 years ago, but the ideas are still there and still can be applied to the modern day craft of software engineering. So he said that software engineering comes with joys and woes. So for example, we all what motivates us? We love to create things. We love to make something useful for other people to use. We just like to play with complex puzzle-like systems. And it's like when you create something new, it's joy. It's like a myth that you are creating, that it has never existed before and suddenly it does. But it comes with some issues. So we are not allowed to do any mistakes. First of all, by the compiler. And then we might not allow to do any mistakes by our user or by their businesses. So for example, imagine the feedback on that
up with a taxi when you missed your flight. So we need to find nitty little bugs in some things which might be very simple at the first sight. I will exploit the daytime theme a bit. So for example, who of you know that there was a 30th February in like a real date in Sweden? It's crazy. So they were on a war and they have forgotten to have the 29th of February on one of the years, and they decided to compensate by having the 30th of February. Now imagine you write a library for this, a historical app, and you can't parse that date, but it was really there. And all the things which are hidden even in the most subtle and simple things can be very complicated because we just don't have that perspective. We don't look at them at that angle. We have established a level of interaction with the date types in .NET, for example, that we take them for granted. But they might not be that good. So, of course, you shouldn't leak more than necessary. So, wow, we've built a very good framework. It's really, really good. Yeah, we have 500 plus lines stack trace. Yep. So, we shouldn't hide too much. We should always know where to stop. So, now let's go to the examples. We'll use two .NET demos, small demos, not really maybe even demos, and two database demos. So I want to involve the audience. So if you want a sweet gift from Oculosity, you just need to interact with me. I think for .NET it would be fair that John will be just helping you if you don't answer the things. So one of my favorite things in .NET is link. It's a very easy thing to get addicted to. I remember when I started using link, I just couldn't imagine me doing any data manipulation without it. When I was looking at simple loops, I thought, yuck, I will not use it, I'll use link instead. But it's non-trivial, and unfortunately sometimes it leaks. So please raise your hand and give some examples when link leaks. Who wants to go? So anything that you might think about link, which you have expected to work differently? Yep.
I will not go into much details. I was having an experience in the past. I was working with link to SharePoint.
Okay.
So apparently what you expect is to just work. But if you don't know how it works under the hood, you turn out to a very bad experience, because what I found later was that link to SharePoint didn't generate the code that I was, it generates under the hood some SQL queries that I wasn't expecting because I didn't dig deep enough.
So basically you had a problem with abstraction that you can get the query you wanted. You might have seen it using ORMs, for example. Yeah. Anybody else? Like really? Didn't you ever get frustrated of link behavior? Either it's a very narrow topic, or you're happy with living with link. Anybody? John? Save the day, please.
Well, I suppose if you use SQL and you have some foreign keys, then you might just receive some objects that are too deep, so they're infinitely deep because they're pointing to one another. So that.
So you might load the tables that you don't want, right?
Yeah, so you might just load too much data that you're not expecting.
This is not really a link leakage. It's more like, I think, interacting with the data source leakage. But let's stop on what link can generate you, because I think this is around the same topic. Anything else? Any other aspect of link that you might think of?
Other problems could be that when using the Fluent API of the link, then you can generate a lot of more SQL scripts and not as performant as you would do manually in a database.
Okay, I'm really sorry, but let's stop with databases because link is really an access to data, which might be in memory data or any kind of other data. Anybody else? Not database related, please.
Actually, I'm not sure about what happens if you are putting a go-to routine inside a link. What happens?
I'm not sure.
Not sure whether I call it a leak, but certainly a misunderstood aspect of link is when the query gets executed. So when it's worth materializing a query and when it's not.
Yeah, this is also a very good thing to mention. Okay. So what I've picked too, and myself, so closures in loops. I don't know if this is the right name, but I'll show the demo. This is a very misunderstood aspect of it, and especially with them introducing breaking changes at some point, and the performance. So I was very happy developer with closures and loops until I heard a talk of Dina Goldstein, which I have a link at the end of the presentations, which I encourage you to hear. She does a very good analysis of performance and memory consumption with link, which might make you think twice if you're writing something very performant in .NET, which also a very good indication that you might be choosing something else, not .NET. I really hope it works, or I will not be able to show the demos. 1 second. I think it should. Okay, good. So, so, I think it's too much. Problem I don't see what's... Sorry for the delay. Very simple code, just a list of actions. Then we enumerate enumerable from 1 to 10, adding a counter inside for each, and adding an action. Then we are invoking that action inside the for each, clear that actions array, and then do the same things in a for. And doing another for each. So you'll have one call, really, to make what will be printed out of it. So who wants to make the call? Yeah, the latest.
the latest version of C#. Who wants to make the call?
I think second one will print 10 for all the lines.
Okay. And the first one?
Not sure we'll do the same.
The same.
Not sure.
Not sure. It has to do also with the versions of C#. And Visual Studio does some magic, so I can't really change the version of C# and recompile here on the fly. But basically, it's almost the same code. You can see it. Almost identical. Should print, at least intuitively, it should print the same thing. But first loop prints from 1 to 10, and the other loop prints only 10. So let's stop a bit and explain. So we are enumerating a counter, and the thing what happens here is really this thing is now copied over something like, okay, counter. Yep. And here we print a C. So something like this happens under the hood. I shouldn't go probably on this conference too much into the details. On the other hand, we are capturing a counter here. And this counter, last value of it is 10. That's why when we invoke it, we'll get only 10s. So I know if it's perfect example, explanation. So let's go to link performance demo. Right? So we have a simple entity which just has an ID. Very simple. So we then create a list of 5,000 of these entities. And first we'll do a first order default which stops at finding the value. It's not a single order default that it will loop to the end for a value of 4,321. And then we reset this stopwatch and do the same thing without link. Very simple. Probably to demonstrate that link is underperforming, I should use something more complicated tests with standard deviation, some science inside it, which you'll find in Dina's presentation. But here you go. I run the first time, 654 against 110 for loop. I'll run it again. Once again, link is much slower. I'm not saying that you should even bother about it, but it might leak, it might bite you if you're writing something which is of very high performance. So now let's do the next thing. Let's generate 50,000, and you can see link still doesn't perform that well. So that's just an example that you have to be aware of, that if you're writing something very speedy, you might consider not using link. And very interesting thing, have you ever used have you ever looked in some .NET framework code? Raise your hand if you did. It's very bad that we are software engineers and we have so small amounts of hands, but you might say that some of this code is ugly. They messed up the collections. I don't know, maybe not messed up, but some explicit interface implementations inside. And generally, there are a lot of code you might not expect to see. So let's move on to the next demo. And once again, I'll need your attention. So value types in .NET. Let's see if you ever pay attention to them. So what's wrong with this code? There are two things wrong. Can you please name it? Okay. I see one hand. Okay. Well, I'm saying from a point of view it won't compile. What you say is, of course, mutability is important, but let's not stop on that aspect. Any other hands?
Okay. We have one default constructor. Pay attention to the fact that these are structs. And structs are very specific. Think of why they have been introduced. Hey, I hear something good.
So for the structure, you have to initialize all properties. So for the second point.
Not really the reason for failing compilation. Okay. John saves the day.
So there are three problems before C#6 and 2 afterwards. One is you can't make one struct derive from another one. Second problem is you can't write a parameterless struct constructor. Third problem before C#6 is you couldn't use, so if we didn't have point3d and we didn't have the parameterless point constructor, then it still wouldn't compile in C#5 because you would need a colon this bracket for the first part because you couldn't assign to properties before the fields are definitely assigned, and the compiler wasn't smart enough to realize that if you assigned just the properties that was assigning the fields behind the scenes.
Okay, so let's, do you want it? Maybe for your wife? Have the same issue, you know? Okay, so no parameterless constructors allowed in structs. Inheritance structs is not allowed. I didn't stop on the third issue, just let's explain why. So no parameterless constructors allowed in structs. So basically, what's the problem I have with this, that any interviewer going through for a .NET position, especially in Moldova, you always get this type of question. What's the difference between a value type and a reference type, right? So, and we just by heart are saying, okay, value types are stored on heap, and the reference type is either a null or a reference to the value, and the value type contains the value, etc. We talk about boxing, unboxing, and we don't think about why we are talking about it. This is a problem. Of course, this is very important to know, and from the collection points of view, generic, etc., you can dig deep into the reasons why they have been introduced. But basically, a value type is something very lightweight, which will allow us to model a very lightweight thing like an elementary type, like an integer. So that's why we keep the value inside there. So what makes it even more interesting that the CLR allows value types to have parameterless constructor, but C# doesn't. Okay, so, and now if we declare an array of points of size 100, do we expect any constructor calls? Do we expect a constructor to be called 100 times? We shouldn't, because it's a lightweight thing. They do an easy arithmetic, they just allocate 4 plus 4, since I had to do integers, multiplied by 100, and they allocate 800 bytes. Constructor is not called, and they are done with it. So we shouldn't expect the constructor to be called. It's not called, and in order to not introduce false expectation, they do not allow a default constructor. So default constructor is not called. Second thing is inheriting is not allowed. So from ECMA 335, which states, just an abstract from there, that the value type inheritance will be sealed to avoid dealing with complications of value slicing. The more restrictive rules specified here allow more efficient implementation without severely compromising functionality. That sounded like some voodoo magic, and we got abstract bit behind this words. We maybe didn't understand the point. I want to illustrate it. So imagine we have a base struct and an inherited struct. Just imagine we can have it. So now we need to assign an A to B. So we want to assign it. And what will we do with the memory in that case? So we have a block, let's say, of 4 bytes, and we're assigning it a block which might be a bit larger in size. Do we extend it or not? What do we do? This is what they call value slicing, at least in my opinion. Then And let's make things more complicated. You have an array of 1,000. In the middle of array, you want to introduce a slightly larger value. What do we do with this array? Do we extend the array and move everything after the element 500? Do we minimize it? So in order to not complicate it, and since these things are very lightweight and are designed for to handle small types, elementary things, they have stopped inheriting. There are lots of other corner cases with structs, but I just decided to stop on these two. And now we'll go to databases, to the things I like the most. Okay, so can you see it good? Okay, so we have a big transaction history table, which is very, very, very large, and I can demonstrate it. So let's see how many rows are inside this table. Okay, it's 31 million rows. Rather big transaction history table, not something that SQL cannot deal with, right? So imagine you want to do a logical read, so you want to read 1,000 latest bought products. 1,000 latest bought products. We'll do a statistics IO on to see how many logical reads are happening. So you see it works pretty heavily. It's not indexed. You can see it on the left, the pane is open, no indexes, just a standard primary key clustered index on a transaction ID. And if we go here, I have today even more reads than when I was running it. But if we multiply this logical read by 8 kilobytes, we almost extract 1 gigabyte of data at this query. So it's a lot, and it's explainable why it works for 6 seconds. It's actually magnificent it works for 6 seconds. But now I want you, so we read 1 gigabyte in 6 seconds, very good product. Now I want you to ask you to index this. I want your help in indexing this table. So we have this query, we need to create one index, which will make it a covering index. Who can make the call, what the index will be?
Simple index on transaction data for this.
But I want it to be covering, so I want to avoid key lookups, bookmark lookups. I want it to be as fast as possible.
Remove a clustered index from ID and change it to transaction data, maybe. Or for newer version, you can create a column store.
Almost there. Any other ideas? It's a simple query. You want to make it as fast as possible. I state that for any table which is 4,000 rows and around 200 bytes, you'll have 2 logical reads, 16 kilobytes read. For a table up to 3 million, you'll have like 3 logical reads. For a table with billions, you'll have 4 logical reads. I want it to be 4 logical reads. So Ivan was very close. So we create an index on transaction date and include the product ID. So we don't have to go 1,000 times and do this lookup. So let's demonstrate it. It will take a while because the table is really big. Okay, fine, it's done. 13 seconds. And now we run the same query. So since I'm reading a bit more than one value, it's 22 logical reads. If I would have read like 5 products, it will be 3 logical reads. So it's the best you can get out of the SQL. It can go faster. If I include the actual execution plan, you'll see it's just an index scan and a top. If I would not have this include statement, I would have an index scan followed by 6 index seek. Yes? So it depends, seek or scan depends on the number of rows we are selecting, and it depends on the tipping point concept. But now let's think about ORMs a bit. So what we say about ORMs, it is the next big thing, that you don't have to learn databases anymore. You'll work in your language of comfort, and you'll generate some SQL, and it will be nice and fancy until it will leak and will be slow, unfortunately. So even for 10,000 logical reads, it's 46 logical, 10,000 rows, 46 logical reads. Performs nice. I go to my ORM of my choice, and this will be in Hibernate. Okay, so you see, I have a transaction ID, product ID, transaction date, quantity, actual cost. So let me introduce a user. I'm just a developer who likes introducing new properties to entities through ORM. It will be nice and fancy. Okay. User ID, simple. And now the same thing. Could it be more? Could it really be more simple than that? We just created a property and we mapped it, right? Now, I had a query before, which was getting a session, did a query over on this big transaction history table, did an order by desk, and took these 10,000 elements. And it was performing with 61 logical reads, you remember, right? But the ORM works as a select star. So now I introduced a new column, and don't do anything else. I don't say I can't do it through ORM. And just run this thing. So first of all, you can see that it created a column for me, which is very fancy. Somewhere at the top, there was an alter statement, and if I do a refresh here, a refresh of columns, there's a new column created for me. I didn't do anything. I just written something in C# and column BAM is there. Nice. But what it really generates now is this query with the user ID included. You see? Because the default transformation, the default projection of Hibernate includes all the columns of the table you are querying on and on the table you are joining into the projection list. And now if you run this query, for 10,000 it will be 30,000 logical reads. Just introducing one simple column. What could have gone wrong? I'm not saying it's performing bad, the index does its job, but the table might grow, it might get slower, high concurrent environment, etc. Even for 1,000 logical reads, it's now 1,000 rows, it's 3,000 logical reads, which is clearly worse than for 10,000 logical reads with the covering index. So I'm a DBA now, I need to fix it. I go back, drop the index, create a new one, including this user, because I want it to be covering. Create a user ID. Oops. Okay, I'll have to wait around 13 seconds once again, maybe a bit more, because this thing is larger. So now we'll go back and make this thing a 10,000 rows select. And we'll run it. And we are back to 66 logical reads. We'll have to update it. And the thing is, it's just a simple example. You can't even imagine how many ways a database leaks. So now if I would put a trace inside it, just use a SQL Server profiler. And We'll profile my application. We'll start it once again. You see that there are some exec sp execute SQL, which is a very specific mode of executing SQL. So what I was doing here when I was showing you, I did ad hoc querying. There I'm using sp execute SQL. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but sometimes it can be limiting. There are really three modes of executing SQL: dynamic SQL, ad hoc SQL, and sp execute SQL. And we just lose two of them just by using an ORM. There are a lot of things which come up with the modes of execution, how it influences the query plan resolution, how it influences plan cache pollution, etc., etc. We can talk about it in a separate day, if you want. But just showing you, the ORMs are leaking, unfortunately. Yeah? Yes. This is a very good question. I'm not criticizing ORMs. This is just an example of leakage, and you need to understand databases and the tools you are using. And the ORMs were not meant for big databases or high-performant databases. And every time we are doing something high-performant with databases, ORM offers different set of classes, which will allow you to focus on the details a bit differently. This is just this is not a critics of ORM. This is just an example of how you cannot hide all the details behind the thing. There was a fourth demo planned about the temporary tables and table variables. If someone can give me the difference between them, that will be cool. He will receive a chocolate. Otherwise, we'll move on because I'm eating up too much time. Who knows what's the difference between table variables and temporary tables? Both are stored on disk. Yes, both are stored on disk.
Different way. Temporary are seen more widely than dynamic, or vice versa.
When should you use one or the other?
No. I think the idea is to where we can see or access the data from web.
So the idea is that a temporary table is a more dynamic thing. It always generates a plan when you are using. Table variable assumes you have a one-row table, and it caches the plan. So if you have a small table, it's more efficient to use table variables. If you have a big table, it's more efficient to use temporary tables. And this is an example of how to deal with the leakage. You should provide your developers the choice to pick one or the other object based on the context. So now let's come back to the slides and to think how can we as engineers minimize leakage, because this is very important to minimize it. So first of all is offer consistent abstraction. It's a simple advice. Make sure you have the same level of abstraction across the board. But I can't stress how many times I've seen it not followed. So just by being sloppy or technically, let's say, lacking some technical knowledge or not caring about the leakage at all, you are breaking this rule. So for example, you have an API and you make sure that all the resources of it are RESTful. So it's a football API. I love soccer, football. So if you use teams to get all the teams and teams free to get the team with ID free, use the same thing to get other resources, players, coaches, etc. Shouldn't expect non-RESTful calls in a RESTful API, for example. Just a simple example. It can be, for example, you have a class, and to interact with it, you always passing some elementary objects, and now you need some complicated class to be built before for one of its methods. So it's different usage of the methods of the same class in different sections of this class. It's very easy to be sloppy and to introduce non-consistent abstraction. So introduce a special additional abstractions for special cases. So for example, continuing the previous example, you decided to go with the put method to modify the whole content of the API resources. For example, I want to modify the teams. I do a put of all the resources and change the teams. So for games, we need a daily delta loads for daily results. So we need to delta load daily results of the games. So start using patch, but do not do delta loads through the put method. This is a very simple advice, but there are different abstractions for special cases. So if you do delta loads, do patch. If you do non-delta loads, do put. And this is really up to you to think that these things should be consistent. And if you can't make it consistent, make it obvious. For example, if we're talking about a class, we can have a class with simple operations and one with more complicated operations, if they are on a different level of abstraction. Accept the leakage. It's inevitable. And let the abstraction ask the developer to make the choice. ORMs do lazy loading versus eager loading. You cannot always do eager loading, and you have to make the call as a developer. Just so face the abstraction, embrace it, and let the others make this choice. For example, class versus struct in .NET. So make the choice whether you want a class or a struct. Make the choice if you want a table variable or a temp table. Just embrace it into your abstraction. And maybe you should not do something abstract at all if it's too complicated and creates too much leakage. So if the leakage is overwhelming, maybe you should use not wrap that thing and use it as it is. So some of the conclusions I would like to share. You have to learn abstractions. You have to understand the nitty-gritty details of how things work. Of course, you shouldn't go and drill too much down because it destroys the whole purpose of abstraction. But you can't afford to not understand why they have modeled the system in that way and how it works in behind, because that will make you a less competent professional. So being a specialist in a domain includes knowing what's hidden behind the abstraction. You need to consider to know the things thoroughly. And ideally, inside a team, you should have people who know different abstractions at a perfection. So my ideal team is, for example, when someone knows JavaScript, front-end abstraction at a very good level, someone works ideally with databases, someone works ideally with back-end code, C# code. So it should be like distributed. It's very good to think about how many abstractions do I know at the perfect level. And that way is one of the indirect indications of how good you are at what you are doing. Think of the tools you use. Does the leakage happen too often in your work? So everybody says that code review, how good the code passed to a code review is measured by the number of what the fucks per second. If the tool you're using creates this kind of situations, so too many what the fucks, maybe this is an indicator you should consider some other tool. When you engineer something, minimize the leakage with all means. You may be talking about an external library, a user page, or anything. It should be obvious, and we should focus on humans, really, as John said. Because after all, it's done for humans as in case of software developers, for humans as an end user. It should be very easy, as seamless, and the tech should be in the background. So there's some further reading links I have provided, some of them to John Skeet's blog with his journeys into C# abstractions. I like very much the Dina Goldstein presentation. And of course, some links to check if you want to get deeper into how SQL works. A very good book by Itzig Ben-Gan, and I should probably have put one more. I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Yuri. Unfortunately, we don't have time to ask questions for Yuri, but if you want to catch him afterwards, then you can ask him as many questions as you want. So thanks, Yuri. Appreciate it. So let's give him a round of applause. And we're going to finish up now with our final presentation from Glyn, who we work with and has an amazing piece of software that he's built and used our teams to build it, which I'm sure he'll mention a little bit about. He's going to come and talk to us about innovation in software development. So Glyn, do come up and we'll try and juggle some laptops.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Could you just raise your hand if you're at university or studying at the moment, just so I get an idea? Okay, so we've got quite a few students. Okay. So I feel like a complete imposter after that. Like it's so interesting that there's so much sort of knowledge in the space, and I'm not a tech guy, but I'm running a team who are building a product for me. So it's been a bit of a different journey for me. So years ago, I used to be a professional rugby player. I got injured. That my career in sport changed, and then I ended up working in the staffing and HR industry. And then about 3 years ago, I stepped out of that industry to go and consult with clients. And one of the key things that happened as I went to consult with clients is that I realized that most clients were having the same problems. And we developed a consultancy where we'd go into a client who was suffering from a problem and we would try to solve those problems. But very quickly we found out that it was lots of human interaction and there had to be a better way rather than 15, 16-hour days. And that's where the journey of tech started. And I ended up in a room with the guys at Amdaris, and we started to sort of scope out how we could create a piece of software that would help us do the consultancy for our clients. And this is a quote from Einstein: "We cannot solve problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." And I think that was the crux of what was happening to us as a business, that we were trying to solve the problems for our clients using the same methodology that had actually caused those problems in the first place, without actually thinking, let's step back from the problem and let's see how we can use technology to actually start to solve the problems for our clients. And this is what took us on a really interesting journey. I've got another quote here, which basically sums up the experience of working with a tech team. So we started working with our tech team, and I took a trip to Moldova, and one of the things I realized that as a client, I hadn't created a vision for the team and shared with the team the direction, the trajectory of where I wanted everything to go. And what happened is when we got in the room and I shared that vision and the team started to embrace the vision, as tech guys and devs started to embrace that vision, something amazing happened. And I think that this is the reason why our technology is so good. It says innovation is a funny thing. Sure, it's a science, but it's also about the right technologies at the right time, the right people at the right place. And more often than not, it can be coincidental. But when you get it right, everything comes together. That's when innovation does what it should do. It changes the rules of the game forever. And I think this sort of summarizes what has happened with us using a dev team who are bought into what we're doing. I think so often, and this is why I say to you as university students and you who are working, so often you give a client what the client is asking for. And often the client doesn't actually know what they really want. And what changed for us was having a dev team that sat down, and I was talking about the problems that we were experiencing, and the dev team started coming up with ideas because they didn't understand the staffing industry, and they approached every situation from a completely different point of view. And I think for you as students, so often when you're thinking to yourself, am I just going to be a cog in the wheel? No. Our product has grown exponentially and has developed because people are saying, right, okay, I'm not just doing what the client wants me to do, I am going to be a part of this journey and bring solutions to the product. John talked about, he said earlier on, tech is not important, people are. That, I think, summarizes everything that we've tried to do. One of the key things about having innovation and making sure that you are trying to empower your people, this is some research which was done by the Happiness Index. And this is why I'm so passionate about saying, right, okay, if we can have developers who are bought in, who are happy, who are diverse, who are coming from different directions and different environments and different histories, what we can achieve is incredible. The research shows that if we've got these innovative teams and innovative environments, that at the end of the day, what we receive is 30% higher productivity. For every client, every client seems a bit demanding, but if we create the right teams and we engage with clients in the right way, we can do that. Staff retention. One of the key things in the staffing industry, in the HR industry, and I'll talk about this later in terms of trends, that one of the biggest issues is something they call turnover and attrition. What happens if you've got really good staff, you train those staff, and then they go to other places? A lot of clients don't understand that actually, if we make a happier environment and we empower our staff to be innovative, to be creative, we can actually have 54% better staff retention. And then thirdly, 3 times more creativity. I think one of the things that I'm amazed about in terms of the project that we're on is it's a very, very creative project, a very, very visual product. But what the team have actually done is they've been very creative in terms of problem solving, in terms of from both a UX and a UI point of view, all the way through to how we solve the problems of scoring, of algorithms, of how we bring the product together. And that has been like a really key thing for us as a business. But what I have learned as a client is this key concept of grassroots innovation. Until I was dealing with tech, I kind of would sit in a room, and if you had the technical architect in a room and he was explaining how things were going to, or he or she was explaining how things were going to go, I'd sit there and I'd lap it up and I'd say, this is brilliant. But what essentially I've realized along the journey is where a lot of the innovation comes from is grassroots. A lot of the innovation comes from those people who are ordinary people, ordinary developers, graduates who are in the product, in the project, and are realizing actually we are dealing with hardship, we're dealing with scarcity, we're dealing with problems. How do we navigate the struggles, the issues of the product, of the project that we're on? And what we've seen in terms of what we're doing is that it is often those people who are right at the coalface, who are experiencing where things are going wrong, where calculations aren't happening right, where the product isn't working as it ought to work, and are having to work a way around that. It's those people. So therefore, if you're like a student and you're thinking, look, I'm looking forward to my first job, think of it in terms of this. You can actually make such a significant difference on the projects you go on to. It's not just about working, it's about having that vision to be able to problem solve, to be able to be creative, and to be able to actually change the way in which the game is played. And what's really interesting about this is that when we looked at our project at the start, it was some of the early things that we had in our backlog we started tinkering with. They have developed now into really robust and well-developed areas. And it made me really think of when MySpace, does everyone remember MySpace? Remember MySpace? A long time ago. So one of the guys who sold MySpace, John Abrams, he talks about at the beginning, when he started, they were just trying to solve problems. So they were writing decompilers for different code, and they also created an application called Mavis Bacon Typing Tutor. But what happened was that they were seeing that there were these problems. People wanted to learn to type, or they wanted to learn to decompile, and they started to create things around the problems. And then if you listen to the story of Mark Zuckerberg, he, when he was young, his dad ran a dentist practice from their house, and they needed to work out how to share documents and share information. And he created this sort of prototype messenger, which was the start of his journey towards, and during that journey, AOL Messenger came in. But it was the start of his journey. And one of the key things is that sometimes it feels like you're doing a lot of work, and a client will say, oh, let's scrap that. But a lot of these areas where you seek to create technology and create solutions to problems, they take you along a journey in terms of something that's going to develop a long time into the future. And then these clients, we have a sort of a wash-up meeting, and this is the senior team. We have a wash-up meeting where we've been out, we've visited our clients, and our clients have come back to us, and we ask them to give us a wish list of the ways they want our application to improve. And then we come back and we discuss these wish lists that our clients have given us, and often they give us quite similar things that they want the product to do. The difficulty there is then we go back to the dev team who already have a backlog, who have already prioritized everything, and we say, can we change, and this happens on a regular basis, can we change it? And it's one of those things that, as much as it's frustrating, if you can understand that every client has a client who they're trying to serve, to make happy, to provide software and technology for, if we can do it in partnership, all of a sudden we start to get greater gains because our technology team, our dev team, work with us as we're going into clients and we're saying, yeah, we can do that, Mr. Client. And rather than it being, oh, why do you keep changing your priorities? It's more about, right, okay, how can we do this dance in terms of moving towards providing clients who are feeding back on a product with the best elements that product can give. So that's been my journey in terms of working with the Amdaris team, in terms of creating a product, working with our clients in terms of what do our clients actually want, and if we are working in an agile way, can we actually pivot when a number of clients say, actually, if it can do this, or we want it to do this, can we make it a better system? But the question is always also about innovation of the future. What is happening in the future? And to be honest with you, I'm probably the worst person because I'm not a tech guy. All I can say is I can basically give you some observations of things that I've seen in the marketplace as it stands and where I think that, you know, there may be a lot of changes. We have one of the large CRMs which is used with recruitment companies. It's called Bullhorn, and they have about 60% of the US market. And every quarter, they give their devs a week off to develop something which is going to serve their clients. And it's a really interesting way that they have looked at how do we stay ahead of the curve, how do we become a better provider and make our system much better. Their devs then go away, they have a week and they create these things, so they create these sales elements to their CRM so that, and then clients are shown what they've created, and then the clients get to vote on what they think are the best things that have been created. Then that goes into the product, and in the next release of the product, they then have a client-voted element to that product. So they brought out Sales Duel, and they've brought out onboarding, automatic onboarding, and compliance, and it's a really interesting way of doing development. But this whole thing about talent, so I've worked in the HR and talent industry. So one of the things I'm seeing with tech is the way that talent is the greatest resource that every business has. You can't, the argument is AI going to take away everyone's jobs? For the foreseeable future, talent is going to be the greatest resource that businesses have. But the issue businesses have with the talent is that businesses look at the risk. What happens if I hire the wrong talent? What happens to productivity if that talent is not engaged? So the solutions businesses are looking for is not necessarily to have and to use talent, but how do you select the right talent and how do you retain the right talent? So I was at an AI conference recently and they were talking about how the NHS, which is perhaps the largest institution in the UK, at their senior level, they wanted to employ some MDs at a very senior level of the business. And they decided to introduce technology into that whole recruitment process. So for the penultimate interviews, the second to final interviews, they had the candidates interviewed and filmed. And the film of those candidate interviews were then sent to a facial recognition company who then look at the way in which their mannerisms and the way in which they respond to questions and answer questions to see how truthful they are, to see how genuine they are, to see how they deal with under pressure. But they didn't tell the agency or the company that was doing this who was their top. And it was really interesting that actually within it, when the results came back, one of the top 3 candidates that this tech agency sent back to them, one of them was actually in their top. But for them, it was mitigating risk. The solution was that we are making a really important hire. We need to employ technology to reduce our risk of getting this decision wrong. And you're getting this more and more in staffing and HR in terms of you've got voice recognition where people are looking at inflections, using technology to sort of really read and understand people's voice. You've also got the whole idea of predictions. So people are sort of looking, there was in the US election, they had a similar instance whereby they sort of read the expressions and the mannerisms of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And what was really, really interesting was that when it came to there were two things that that sort of swung it either way. When it came to confidence, they were both as confident as each other, but Hillary showed more nervousness through the whole of the campaign than Donald Trump. And it's really interesting to think that people are making those decisions on how to vote in terms of the body language, the non-verbal communication that they're seeing. And as a result of this, a lot of businesses are starting to say, right, okay, can we use this type of technology in staffing and in talent to make sure that we've got the right people? There's another way which businesses are using. They're saying, right, okay, if in my business, I want to grow my business, and I know that in other circumstances, other businesses which have grown really quickly, what are the key characteristics, backgrounds, and competencies of the people who have led those businesses or who have done things in those businesses to grow them or to take them to where they are? So therefore, they're taking all of this data and they're starting to use this in recruitment. And I think this will become more and more of something that we see in the HR and staffing market, is saying, right, okay, we've got lots and lots of data. Can we start to take this data, crunch this data, and start making decisions based on meaningful data? And then something that we're looking at the moment is that for a lot of our clients, so in staffing, you have a very high turnover of staff. And clients are looking at ways in which to stop to work out who is likely to leave first in my organization. And it's really interesting that they're starting to sort of look at browsing behavior, look at timings, all of these things, and start looking and matching that data to how are these employees working, and can we actually predict who are our least engaged people and who are the most likely to leave our organization so that we can create the right interventions. So I think that area of talent is going to be something that continues to grow, because people know that they invest a lot of money in talent, they invest a lot of money in their people, and they want to make the right decisions with their people, engage their people and retain their people for longer. Another thing that we're seeing, oh, it dropped, ecosystems. Another thing we're seeing is that a lot of clients, so we're seeing with a lot of the sort of enterprise level clients, they're using ecosystems. So Facebook Workplace for Facebook Workplace came out, and we're seeing a number of clients who have started to dabble with this and saying, right, okay, if we use Facebook Workplace and start saying, right, okay, we've got this project to be done, but we've got this disparate workforce which is spread across the world. We know we've got the talent and the resources, but they may not want to work in work hours, but we need this site built for marketing, or we need this piece of work done here. They're starting to use ecosystems to draw on the talent and start harnessing that talent and saying, right, okay, we can push this out to a wider variety of people. Everyone in the staffing industry is talking about Google for Jobs at the moment. People are worried about it because they're worried that if Google can actually present jobs to job seekers which are more aligned to what they're looking at based on their browsing history, their interests, and who they are, what does that do for recruiters within the marketplace? Does that mean that it's going to circumvent recruiters and that clients will actually get closer to the right types of people who fit the mold and the culture? So we're starting to see how these sort of ecosystems and these sort of networks are going to actually change in coming years. And then there's things like, just from a personal point of view, we've got a new app in the UK called Waze, and it's a mapping app, but it also allows you to sort of text. So if you're late if you're late to a meeting or something like that, you can just send a text, and it will send a map to the person so they can track where you are. And because I travel so much, I use that so much now to show clients and others if I'm running late or I need to meet at another location where I am. And it's just meant that it's made life a lot easier and made it easier to communicate. And I think that those ecosystems, they're just going to grow and grow and grow. And then finally, I think the biggest thing is trust platforms. Trust, I mean, even if you think about sort of the Moldovan government, you know, there may be issues over trust historically, but we're moving into an era where people don't have to rely on institutions to have trust. So if you think of it in terms of, let's say, Airbnb or Uber or eBay or Amazon, where a user actually is getting rated, and therefore based on the ratings that they get, will determine whether they are used again to interact with or to do business with. And we're having more of this in the staffing industry with Glassdoor, and then we've got Ask Nicely, and all of these rating systems are really creating an environment whereby trust can actually people can be held accountable in a way that they weren't held accountable before. And then if you take a leap forward, I don't know how long or whatever it will take for blockchain to actually mature, but think in terms of if people are judged based on the projects that they've done, and that is like held on a ledger, that whole area of trust in terms of like being able to rate people and see exactly what you're getting without having to interact or know that person, that's going to change the work life. But it's also going to change staffing as well, because clients will not necessarily need to reference through agencies and through third parties. They'll be able to go to this ledger of information and say, right, okay, that's already referenced by a peer group, by community, on the basis and quality of the work or the service that's being provided. So we're really seeing some differences, and the key thing here is that as we have moved on our technology journey, all of this was a long, long way away. And as our product has started to develop, which is only like in 2 years, we're already started to engage in those conversations about how do we bring some of this into our projects? How do we bring some of this into an offering that we provide for our clients? Because if we solve that, if you've got, let's say for instance, you've got a client who's got 10,000 staff, and the cost of hiring one member of staff, let's say, they've worked out is 15,000 per year, and then they have a high attrition rate. If we can bring a solution that saves them 5 million, 10 million off their bottom line through our products and through the way that technology is moving, all of a sudden the rules and the game changes. And that's what we're moving into. So I think as you engage on projects, and as you engage with teams, don't just think about the here and now. Like, it is moving at the speed of light, and it is an exciting time. And I think we're testament to sort of looking to the horizon and looking to how things are going to change and how we can embrace technology movements and technology changes for our clients to solve their solutions and to solve their problems. Thank you.
Question mark. Thank you ever so much, and that is let's get all of our speakers up. Actually, it'd be really good to just give everyone a round of applause. So have we got Alessia, and where's we've lost Chris. We'll find Chris. But yeah, thank you guys for all your contribution and you know, for making today possible. So thank you very much. We will get a photo of you all a bit later. So we're going to finish now, but we have got a round table event planned after lunch for some of you guys. So do stick around, and we look forward to chatting to you more. And we're organising other events like this as well, so keep your eyes out on Facebook and LinkedIn to other up-and-coming events. And as well, we just want to thank the guys at TechWell for hosting us. They've done a great job. It's a great venue, which I'm sure we'll use again. So thank you so much for coming. We've overrun a little bit, but Thank you, and have a really good rest of your day. Thank you very much. We'll be coming back here for the roundtable at 2:30 for those that are taking part.